I'm free next Saturday. After that, I'm kind of booked.
Changing, it's just that the get their number, and they can't.
I already know February 13th I'm leaving to go out of town for vacation. I'll be back on the 18th. Yeah.
We are ready.
Call to order the meeting of the January 9th, 2020 meeting for the P and Z Board. We'll begin with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
James Gallen,
Here.
Anthony Brown,
Here.
William Wiley,
Present.
John Gustafson, Margaret Shepard, Stephen Hunt,
Here.
Evelyn Harris Clark,
Present.
Moeti Newby.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 3, acknowledgement of board member absence notification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Gagnon, Acting Director of Development Services for the city. I did hear from Mr. Gustafson as well as Ms. Shepard that they would be unable to attend tonight's meeting. With that said, I would ask that both alternates receive voting rights for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Item 4, additions and deletions to the agenda.
Yes, thank you. I only wanted to comment on the fact that the Traffic Performance Standard Review letter from the county, which is dated August 6, 2019, for the Storage Rental of America project, that was omitted from the packet when it was distributed. So we've provided hard copy in everyone's binder tonight, as well as for public consumption in the back of the council chambers as well. That's the only addition. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could add just a very short discussion on the possibility of a work group on the coming Saturday to talk about planning and strategies.
Right, we can cover that under item 10, general discussion.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Moving on to item 5, disclosure by board members and adoption of the agenda. Are there any disclosures? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I so move.
Second.
Roll call.
James Gallen,
Yes.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
Stephen Hunt,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark,
Yes.
Moeti Newby.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Item 6, approval of minutes from the December 19, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second.
Roll call.
William
Second by
Wi-
Ms. Clark.
I'm sorry?
Second by Ms. Clark.
Thank you. William Wiley,
Yes.
Stephen Hunt,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark,
Yes.
Moeti Newby,
Yes.
Renee Burgess.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
All right, item 7, unfinished business. Seeing none, on to item 8, new business.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Under new business, we have 6 items tonight. The first 2 are interrelated and the last 4 are interrelated. I'll be able to explain that more as we go through each item. The presentation order that I'd like to provide to the board, if it pleases the board, is to have an independent presentation for item A and B, and uniform or collective presentation for the last 4 items. So that would be a collective presentation for letters C, D, E, and F, if that pleases the board.
Fine.
Okay, so the first item under new business is letter A, which is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 31 zoning, Article 1 in general, Section 31-1 definitions, by adding a definition for self-service storage and amending Chapter 31 zoning, Article 5 district regulations, Division 18 IG General Industrial District, Section 31-382 use regulations, by adding self-service storage as a special exception use, and amending Chapter 31, Article 7, off-street parking and loading, Section 31-577, off-street parking ratios, by adding parking requirements for self-service storage facilities, providing for conflicts and severability, and providing for an effective date. So, Madam Chair, this item is being presented separate from new business item B, because this request is for a global amendment to the city's Code of Ordinances. It is interrelated to item B, however, because the site plan that's being proposed is reliant on this ordinance amendment proceeding as well, in order for that item to proceed. But being that they are separate from one another as far as the ordinance having a global impact, we'll proceed with the independent presentation for that item at this time. So again, before you is the title block for this item. This is staff number ZA-19-01. So the background and analysis on this is the applicant for letter B is also the applicant for letter A, which is Storage Rentals of America. They somewhat recently acquired the property located at 1177 West Blue Heron Boulevard. I guess it would have been 2 years ago now, being that we're in 2020. And what they're looking to do is really renovate that site. The previous owner had not really maintained the facility up to most standards. And this new proposal would result in a new facade for the building, as well as a new building itself. As we went through the site plan process and some of the pre-application meetings, we realized that the city code really didn't have a definition for self-storage use. And that resulted in city staff having to really look at other code sections that could be applicable. So as far as parking ratios for off-street parking ratios, the only item that was somewhat close would be a warehouse designation, which was requiring 1 parking space per every 1,000 square feet of building area. Now, that was referenced earlier, there's really a de minimis amount of traffic that's generated by this site. So, I mean, more and more prevalent. And in many places, it's regarded as not as desirable a use as some uses that could provide more employment opportunities. So a lot of municipalities have protections in place to ensure that the applicant is actually really enlightening as far as how far off the city's regulations street storage category just for self-storage use at a ratio of 1 space per every 75 units, with the caveat that they're much more flexible ratio where they allow 1 parking space. The site plan that are requiring, but we have for your review definitions for a self-storage facility, and this was based off of I guess best practices or industry standard other municipalities as far as how they define self-storage uses. Automobiles, trailers, recreational vehicles, and similar rolling stock as provided by an approved site plan. Approval within the general industrial district. Finally, the off-street parking ratios would be amended by adding the new minimum of 5.
So we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Wiley.
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, Mr. Hunt?
Mr. Gagnon, are there other self-storage units in the city of Riviera Beach that would be forced to make any adjustment in their strategy in order to comply with this new ordinance?
So we do have other self-storage facilities within the city. However, this new code requirement would only come into play if there was a substantial improvement on that site. So if they came in and applied for renovations exceeding 50% of the value, or if they applied for a brand-new site plan for an addition of buildings similar to the applicant that we'll speak of in a moment, then they would likely have to meet these regulations based on that substantial improvement finding. Otherwise, anyone that exists in the city now would be able to continue on as if there was no change at all.
There's no retroactive implication at all.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Nakumbe?
I have a question. Is there a separation between handicap parking and maybe motorcycle parking in the parking ratios, or is it just how do they decide?
It's an option available to applicants, but from what I recall, our code is silent as far as location of motorcycle parking currently.
So that wouldn't count towards the requirement if they basically included motorcycle parking. Would that count towards their ratio?
It really wouldn't. If there was a unique circumstance and they could justify why, maybe it was a motorcycle repair shop and they have 70% of their employees all ride bikes. So they can come in and say, hey, we don't have as many cars on site, so we want to convert some standard parking spaces to motorcycle parking, and we want to try to satisfy the parking ratio based on that.
Level, 2 levels, before I ask the next question?
So,
The storage
and I want to
complexes
answer
of-
your question, but I also want to,
that has 2 or 3 levels, and then this parking ratio may not apply because there are more floors, more units, where this address the parking ratio when it's going up that way, but not widthwise. I just want to make sure that
Sure.
our staff recommendation, a moving truck or SUV or a person coming in, and that's a parking spot. But what else does this accommodate in terms
first, as far as a multi-floor building, what we would do is we would look and kind of dissect the uses. So if there was a large office component or if there was a mixed-use component, which is becoming more popular, for example, the bottom floor might be commercial or retail, and maybe a second or third story could be storage use. What we would do is ask the applicant to break down those individual uses, and we would apply our parking ratios for each one of those uses. So in those additional floors, that would provide the grand total of parking spaces for that future development.
You mean I didn't get you off guard?
Move forward with that.
Okay, thanks, good job. The second question.
Yeah, and the second, if within the site plan, so let's say you have a U-Haul truck, you'd be able to pull up to an area that's very close to a bay door, and that would be separate and apart from any parking requirement.
Trailers, maybe even some sort of commercial truck. So
It
it's
could.
not what I'm thinking in my head, the public storage where they just move their furniture in, or a company moves excess boxes of paper, but we're really talking long-term, high-end sort of accommodation for that type of equipment or vehicle.
Absolutely.
I
So
see.
what this new definition will help really clarify is that outdoor storage can be designated on a site plan for whether it's a motorhome or an 18-wheeler or a boat or any other type of rolling stock that is going to be potentially a high-value item that's stored for an extended period of time. So that can be called out on a site plan as far as where those spaces will be and where the striping will be, total number of storage spaces, things like that. So this definition will help staff guide that in the future.
Okay, Madam Chair, if I may, that just generated another question, and that is, with that type of equipment being stored for long-term, and you may address this a little bit later in the presentation, but my question is, when you get to the, how it shouldn't be visible from the street, you can either answer that now or later. I want to be clear in understanding that that sort of equipment would not be visible from the street based upon the type of exterior landscaping or barriers that would hide this equipment and keep the aesthetic of Blue Heron. So you could address that now, or you could address it later, your preference.
Yeah.
Jeff, one moment, I would like to add to
Sure.
what Ms. Harris-Clark just stated. Also, could you add to the safety, so like when we experience a storm, what would be the requirements to have those items secured? Like if it was a boat, does it need to be moved from that storage facility to a different facility to address the safety concerns as well?
Okay. The visibility conversation, from staff's perspective, we would allow the applicant to propose how they could satisfy that request as far as ensuring that any sort of items being stored would not be visible from our major roadway corridors. So that could be done through landscaping. The other thing that's worthwhile mentioning is oftentimes those, the rolling stock can be of high value. So you're describing boats that have exposed motors, RVs. So more often than not, the storage areas are secured, and there's some sort of security fence that's provided to ensure that people just can't come and go from the site. So landscaping is typically the preferred method. However, and we'll discuss a little bit on the next item, the actual building configuration itself is providing a majority of that visibility screen. It's almost a horseshoe-shaped concept, so there's only a very small area that could be visible, and the landscaping that's being provided will ensure that there's no visibility of storage from Blue Heron Boulevard.
But one thing I would like to add, we're just talking about this particular area, but in the future, if we're putting this in ordinance, this, could be other potential areas as well. So
Absolutely.
we want to make sure that we keep that in mind.
Yeah, so it would be, each site is somewhat unique and each proposal is somewhat unique. So staff would work with the applicant to see what tools are in the toolbox to see how we can satisfy that requirement. Now, your follow-up question as far as moving devices, a rolling stock, if there was a storm event, hurricane, things of that nature, it might end up being an internal policy of that operator. So management could say, if there's a category 3 or 4 hurricane that's expected, it's the owner's responsibility to remove belongings from the site, or perhaps they would be moved for them. But that's really more of an operational aspect for the management team. It's a really good question, and beyond that, I don't think I have a more in-depth answer at this time. We can look into it more, though.
Okay, I would like to, because I don't know if we could kind of leave our safety up to the management. So if the city could, look into it a little bit more to see what we could put in place on our end to secure the safety of our residents.
Understood.
If I can piggyback on the comment that Madam Chair has just said, we as a city are pretty much a marine industry city. And I'm pretty sure that there has to be something in place where we don't leave the operational aspect of that up to the management teams with the boats and the equipment and the everything else that has to go along in the marine industry. Because if they don't do it right, then, you know, we are at risk as residents and other property and things of that nature. So there has to be something in place, and maybe the management company, they've been doing this for maybe a long time. Maybe they already know that already, how they accommodate falling in line with the municipality's procedures in that instance. Maybe it's already there, but clearly us being a marine industry and knowing how volatile those hurricanes, because we get hit dead on. We've been lucky, we got missed the last couple of hurricanes, but the next time we get a Cat 4 and Cat 5, I cannot believe that we have, as a city, just let the management teams of these businesses, of these industries, just say, well, we'll decide at the last hour, we're gonna pull this out. We're just gonna wait and see if this hurricane comes and hit. And then by then, it's just too late. Because I live by the marina, and maybe I do want a big old sail to come and hit my roof so I can get a new house, or maybe I don't.
Yeah, and oftentimes it would be to the benefit of whoever owned the belonging to protect it however they could. So if that meant moving it, you know, I could see a circumstance where maybe someone's out of state and they don't have access to it. But I'm trying to think of other examples. So even throughout the city, if you had a vehicle and you don't have a garage, the vehicle's going to be outdoors. So, you know, it's going to be difficult to really get to each business and ensure that all of the rolling stock is placed somewhere else during a storm event.
I'm raising eyebrows.
Me too.
So, but again, just in this instance for the applicant, they've probably gone down this path and maybe have an answer for us, but we as a city, we should know for sure, because truly we are a marine industry and we got the most dangerous type of equipment that if it is catapulted in the wrong type of category hurricane, we're in big trouble. And we've seen some of that. But just in their case, maybe they may have an answer just for their applicant process.
Okay. It might be more appropriate during the next item for them to kind of talk
Sure.
about how they operate internally. You know, don't think they'll be able to speak for other businesses, but maybe just best management practices throughout the industry.
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Oh, no comments at this time.
Mr. Gallen?
No comment.
All righty, so seeing no other comments on the item and there's no comment cards. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move we adopt the proposed change in the code to address the self-service storage unit issue, and with the appropriate comments added to Mr. Gagnon's responsibility to take a look at the detailed wording on safety and security.
I second.
Roll call?
William Wiley,
Yes.
Stephen Hunt,
Yes?
James Gallen,
Yes.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark,
Yes.
Moeti Nube,
Yes.
Renee Burgess.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
All right, item B.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So the next item, item B, is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving an application, SP-19-23, from SROA Capital LLC, requesting site plan amendment approval to expand the existing self-storage use by constructing an additional 36,310 square feet of new building area, as well as providing building facade and landscaping improvements at 1177 West Blue Heron Boulevard, comprised of approximately 8.58 acres of land, identified by parcel control number 56, 43, 42, 29, 56, 000, 0010, providing for conditions of approval and providing for an effective date. So the title block is provided before you on the PowerPoint, and this is staff number SP-19-23. So as previously mentioned, this is the companion item to letter A, and the applicant is SROA Capital, and they are represented by Schmidt-Nichols. And the request is to seek site plan approval to construct an expansion to the existing facility. And again, it's located on Blue Heron Boulevard, addressed as 1177 West Blue Heron. The information before you is taken directly from the staff report. I just want to make sure it was available for the general public on the record, but it gives you some of the existing site dynamics. The zoning is currently limited industrial with industrial future land use. And the site is primarily surrounded by industrial uses as well. Blue Heron is directly to the north. Further north is the existing multifamily residential uses, as well as Avenue O. So here's an aerial view of the site. And as we get a little closer, you can really see that, you know, the new ownership group does want to improve the site. Previous ownership group did not maintain it to standards that most would. So we're happy to see that the new ownership group is here and they're looking to renovate this site. Kind of excited about the new building facade and landscape package. I think it'll be a really nice addition to Blue Heron. So again, this is taken directly from the staff report. I did just mention the fact of the facade improvements and the landscaping improvements. In total, if this proceeds, it will result in a total of 120,983 total square feet of building area for self-storage use. And this is referring to the fact that the concurrent application was provided for the text amendment that was just discussed by the board, and that it is really tied to that ordinance proceeding because there's some site characteristics that are reliant on that ordinance proceeding. So for the record, here is the site plan. And this is just zooming in a little closer for everyone's ability to see it because text is rather small. I do call out here, this is the existing building area in yellow. And the new proposed addition is called out in green. So as discussed previously, it does form almost a horseshoe pattern where most of the uses or any sort of internal storage use would be shielded from view from the street. Additionally, there'll be heavy landscaping as well as fencing around the interior storage areas. For your record, the landscape plan is attached as Exhibit B, and here are just the 4 cut sheets because it's a larger site. What I did here was zoom in on 2 of those cut sheets that front Blue Heron Boulevard to really allow the board and general public to see how there really will be a new landscape facade included. And that's following our principal arterial design overlay guidelines, which were approved a few years back, or amended a few years back to really push future development to provide a really nice landscape package and to try to create a uniform design along Blue Heron Boulevard. Here is the proposed building elevation for the site. The top image is the full view from Blue Heron Boulevard, and the side 2 are the next 2 are just the sides of that top building elevation. And what we did here is provide a comparison of the existing building facade with the proposed. So the proposed is up top. You can see it'll be a nice, really clean design. There'll be much glass exterior, and what isn't really demonstrated on the rendering is how the landscaping will really improve the site and kind of shield a lot of the building from view, more or less. So just for the record, the staff analysis is provided from our staff report in the PowerPoint. And staff is recommending approval with following conditions. The first is that a 2-year landscaping performance bond for 110% of the value of landscaping and irrigation shall be required before a certificate of occupancy or certificate of completion is issued. The second is that construction and landscaping improvements must be initiated within 18 months of the effective date of this resolution in accordance with section 31-60B of the city's code. Number 3 is the city council authorizes city staff to approve future amendments to the site plan administratively, so long as the site plan does not deviate greater than 5% from the originally approved site plan. The fourth is that this development must receive final CO from the city for all buildings and units approved within 5 years of the approval of adopting resolution, or that adopting resolution shall be considered null and void. Number 5 is all future advertising must state the development is located within the city of Riviera Beach. Fees and penalties in accordance with City Code Section 31-554 will be levied against the property owner and/or business for violation of this condition. Number 6, once approved, this resolution shall supersede any previous site plan approval resolutions associated with this property, causing previous site plan approval resolutions to be null and void. Number 7 is that the applicant shall consult with the Riviera Beach Police Department in order to incorporate one or more internet protocol, IP cameras, within their site design for Riviera Beach Police Department use. Number 8 is the concurrently processed ordinance associated with creating an off-site parking ratio for self-storage use must be approved and adopted prior to the site plan approval becoming effective. And finally, number 9, prior to the approval of city building permit, the applicant shall provide a drainage report sufficient to demonstrate compliance with the city and South Florida Water Management District regulations, specifically demonstrating compliance with City Comprehensive Plan Infrastructure Element Policy 1.5.3. So the applicant is available to answer any questions, and I'm also here to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, so there's no comment cards, no public comment cards on this item, so we'll go ahead and hear for the applicant if the applicant would like to speak.
Yes, Madam Chair, they would like to present as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. For the record, Josh Nichols with Schmidt Nichols. Jeff did a great job. I really don't have a lot to go through here, but I did want to touch on a couple quick points. Really want to show you the color site plan because I think it pops a little better. It's tough to read with the black and white version. So this is kind of showing how that landscaping will look throughout the front corridor. As you saw on the existing shot there, there's just a few palm trees. So this will really create a nice lush landscape in the front. The building facade, as you saw, was a modification there. We had also spoken about the storage area. Does this have is that the laser?
Yeah, I think in the center.
Okay, so this area in the middle is what we were talking about on the last item for storage of those larger vehicles. So those are 30-foot depth spaces. So they would be for boats, RVs, larger trucks, as we had mentioned. And again, as Jeff said, there's really this small window here that's viewed from the right-of-way. And as you can see, this landscaping, you have a focal point tree here, and then this also curves around. So you have a lot of screening there, and then the balance of it is all behind we planned it that way, of course, to make sure that it was screened. Another thing that we talked about was, that was a concern, was the storm prep. And I think that's a very valid point. I think there's a couple things going on there, because I think when we do get a storm warning, you're going to see a lot of people flock to utilize this site, because in my eyes, I'd rather have my neighbor's boat at this facility versus next door with the boat stuff flying around and hitting my house there. I'd rather have it, stationed here where it's surrounded by industrial uses. What they do is in other facilities is that they do a walkthrough, make sure that there's no loose materials or loose things on the boats or RVs. They send out emails and correspondence to those owners. The owners all have to have insurance, to be able to park their vehicles there. And then also, we were also thinking it may be wise because of the location proximity to the coast, and that there will be quite a few boats that would be parked in here, is to do eye hooks that would be secured into the ground, and that way you could tie down the vehicle. So I think that would be a really big help. Again, they do that walkthrough, so that's part of the management aspect of it, because again, they don't want loose material flying into their building either. So they're going to do as much as possible. But again, not everyone is going to want or take their vehicle or boat out of the facility. And I think actually more people they'll want to get in here. They'll be clamoring to get in. So, but that is what this middle area is intended for. As Jeff had mentioned, we have loading zones here, and then also there's loading zones back here as well for the building. So any of those larger trucks that are there for unload, like a U-Haul or something, they have those specific areas. The general parking that's required is all provided for, these are just customer parking spaces and also for employees. So those would not be where U-Hauls and things of that nature would be located. Again, just showing, I thought this was great that Jeff had this in here of the current. As you can see, it's a little dated, a little worn, and was in need of some updates. So it's just good to see, this and the next project you're going to hear are both in this immediate vicinity on Blue Heron, and really going to spruce up the corridor. So looking forward to that. So again, with that, just wanted to mention those few items. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with the board comments with Mr. Wiley.
I don't know whether this question is for yourself or Mr. Gagnon. I want to ask, the building that's located directly behind you, who operates that building? Do you?
Yeah, so let me go back to the site plan. So that's a FedEx distribution facility.
Okay.
So and again, I didn't bring this up because it's not really part of our project, but there is a cross parking agreement that was entered into between the subject parcel and the FedEx. So those additional spaces are for the use of the FedEx, and there's 2 access points through the subject property to allow them access.
Okay, because I actually used to manage that FedEx back there. That's why I was asking to see if it was still back there.
Absolutely.
The question I have for you there is a lot of traffic that's going through there for FedEx throughout the course of the day, even usually late at night also with late trucks coming in, especially at the Christmas time. Is there a security between coming from your entrance there for your building going to FedEx? Is that separated, or is that something that you guys are going to share?
No, so this drive is obviously open,
Right.
to keep, but there is fencing that comes, it touches the building here, connects, comes over, and then crosses here and connects here. So this entire yard area, I guess you could say, is all fenced in and secured.
Got it. Now, also, when you got ready to develop this area, was it made big enough? Because some of the trucks that are coming through there are pretty big. So will it still be protected from anyone, any parking? Because I see through the one area there, I see parking spaces on the side of that area.
Is that over, which side are you?
Right here to the left side, like right where it curves to come around, like go up a little bit more.
Oh, right here,
there.
yes.
All right, so now with the trucks coming through that area, because like I say, some of the trucks are pretty large, would those vehicles there be protected also? And was it made to actually accommodate those larger vehicles going through there without any damage to any other vehicles or any private property in that area?
Absolutely. So that's a standard size drive aisle, and there's actually an access road easement, and that encompasses basically that driveway. So we maintained, just looking for, it's 20 feet in sections, and it looks like it goes out to 24 feet in some other sections. So there's plenty of room for trucks to be able to maneuver through there. So we had to maintain that as part of the access easement.
So during certain parts of the day, what was your access for that building? Will it be 24 hours?
No, not 24 hours, no.
What would the later hour be?
9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.
To 5:30. All right, because I just wanted to see if that would actually interfere with the FedEx build, with the vehicles that are coming in at that time, and would that actually, I guess the traffic coming through that area, will it hurt your?
It's a very low traffic generator, the storage, and
Right.
they're currently operating now with this same situation. So, you know, so we will be adding a little bit of square footage, but I don't, it won't impede on
Won't
their
impede anything?
operation.
Okay, just
Correct.
want to make sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
Yes, I applaud your mention of the tie-down hooks and things of that sort, so I would strongly encourage you to take a look at that as a good option, and if so, perhaps suggest it back to the city for something that we should consider for future projects and things of that sort. I mean, I think that's a very prudent strategy. Still does not absolve the owner of the vehicle or the boat from paying good attention, but having that there makes it a lot less easy to ignore.
Absolutely.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Nakumbe?
This is probably more of a I watch too much TV question. I'm just curious about I guess like biohazards and stuff that people store, and like what are the protocols for just ensuring that nothing crazy is being going on in the units? Do they have like dogs that come through, or there's some type of I don't know, based off your experience, I'm sure there's things in place. I just was curious about that.
Yeah, so my name's Sean Dewhurst. I'm with Storage Rentals of America. I'm their construction manager. I'm not as familiar with the day-to-day operations, but I am aware we do not allow them to store any food, any hazardous materials, any things that would, perishable items, anything of that nature. I don't believe the city of Riviera Beach, but other facilities that we have, they do use our facility as training areas and do bring dogs in for drugs of that nature, or, meth labs and things.
Right.
But I'm not aware of anything specific with the city of Riviera Beach.
So is that a city requirement that sometimes you have to have dogs come through?
No,
Or
in
that
other
is like a-
cities, we've partnered with and offered up the facility to them for training purposes, to the police, so that they can do that. We don't allow it. Obviously, we can't regulate and have access or enter people's units. But we don't currently have anything in place with the city of Riviera Beach.
Well, you want to be opposed if,
No.
we want to, okay.
Yeah, we currently, believe you guys have gunshot monitors on our roof currently, that you guys maintain and support. We haven't put cameras in yet, just because it's cost prohibitive with what we'd like to do. So we're willing to add cameras to your facility as well.
Okay, thank you.
Just a caveat off of my colleague's question, and I have a couple of more. You may not be able to go into someone's storage unit. I would hope you would have all rights to do that in today's unfortunate landscape. I work for a cargo shipping company, and we go into cargo all the time because people want to move explosives. They want to move lithium batteries that blow up. They don't think because they're in the iPads, or computers, and cell phones, which are on pallets, that's not flammable. So, with you being so close to a residential area, I'm pretty sure you must have some sort of criteria where you're going to ensure flammables are not being brought in, lithium batteries, which are explosive, that type of thing. If you could address that, and then I have a couple of other questions.
So I'm, again, not as familiar with the operations, but all tenants are required insurance. They're not allowed to store with us without insurance. We are only operable during business hours when management is on site. So management does have somewhat of a view of what comes in and out, but we don't inspect boxes. That's just time prohibitive. I don't know too many people that'd be willing to store with people that have it rigorously searched in such a manner. But we do require the insurance policies. If we do smell things or there is anything suspicious, they are notified. The correct authorities, whoever that may be. I can bring it to their attention about implementing a
Sure.
policy.
I mean, I'm in the transportation industry, and you'd be surprised what people sneak by you.
Okay.
Explosives. And one of the things you want to do is put it in a storage unit until you decide you want to do something with it. But going on to the next question I have is that the aesthetics. And I'm just going to take off my P&Z hat and just really speak as a resident. And I don't live too far from here. And we as a city are trying to determine who do we want to be when we grow up. You know, we don't have a downtown area. Are we going to be warehouses everywhere? Are we going to be storage units or buildings, facilities everywhere? And are we going to look very industrial? And we could easily very much look like that in today's landscape because the businesses aren't doing more to beautify their property. And I'm just asking you to take this under consideration because that street, Blue Herring, and your facility, you're going to do some great renovations, modifications to it. But on the exterior, you said lush. Lush is relative. And I'm sure you can put up trees and everything, but I'm just saying, could you just make it spectacular? Can you make it beautiful? We have developers and the representatives who come in and say this, well, we've met the bare minimum. I'm tired of businesses coming into our city and meeting the bare minimum. I want them to step up their game. I, as a resident, have to step up my property because I live as the gateway, if you will, into the boats of tourists coming into Riviera Beach. And I could have done the bare minimum, put out one palm tree and called it a day, but I put a lot of money into my property because I wanted people to feel that when they came down my street, that this wasn't a poor neighborhood, that people didn't care, that somebody took enough time to do more than the bare minimum. So if I'm sure you might have a little bit more in your budget, that even if you stick an artifact or two out there, if you got some great lighting out there, if you kick it up with the more than palm trees and bring some nice color, you know, help us so we can help you. And so I'll put my P&Z hat back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris Clark. Well said. Any thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, you know, this is part of the Blue Heron overlay that was recently adopted, and I think staff did a great job in requiring above and beyond landscaping that you would find in any other corridor or property in the city. So, you know, going back to, you know, well, again, what's out there now, but what we've done across the frontage there is really created, you know, we actually, there's so much landscaping, we're worried that you're not gonna be able to see the building. And you wanna know, I mean, of course, people know that this building
Just
and use
bring
is
in the
there.
revenue. That's good.
Exactly. But no, I think you're gonna get that wow factor from the amount of trees and the types of species that are out there. It's really gonna make a big difference to the corridor, and I think a lot of that is due to the ante of the code that was created for this corridor. So you're gonna see that on the next project as well. But there's a lot of trees that were put in. I think the code requires 250 trees for the site, just based on the new corridor requirements, and so it's quite upgraded from the standard code. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Harris Clark. Question while you're up here. You stated, or maybe it was the previous gentleman before you, that the business operation hours were from 9:30 to 5 p.m. And that 9 a.m. to 5:30, and that your clients would only, or your customers would only have access during those hours.
To the building itself.
To the
But
building.
For boat storage and the outside area, that would be controlled by a keypad, which they would be able to, after hours, drop off their boat or trailer or things like that. But
Okay,
the
and
building
so,
itself, they would not be able to enter the building.
Here, go.
To the mic. The building itself, they would not be able to enter after 5:30, but the parking area for purposes of business trailers and things of that nature, or late night boat rides.
thank you for that clarification. The other thing that I think I just heard, was mentioned about the cameras and that you would be willing to, but that is item 7 as part of your approval. It is a condition that the applicant will consult with Riviera Beach Department in order to incorporate one or more IP cameras within their site.
I meant to say that we would have done it already, just at this point, it's cost prohibitive with the amount of work that's going to be done
Gotcha.
to implement a camera program and then redo it for the addition.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. Miss, do you have a?
Yes, this question may be more for Mr. Gagnon. Because now of the size of this expansion, what is the city lighting going to look like to cover this property now? Because it's expanded, and we're talking, cars going by, pedestrians, just lighting. What are we doing as a city now since this is going to be expanded?
Very good question, because when we leave here, that particular stretch of Blue Heron is very dark. Like the lights are always out in that area. So very good question.
So, I guess it's a twofold response. First is Blue Heron is a state roadway. Is this one working?
No.
So Blue Heron is a state roadway, so they have specific lighting requirements for that roadway. Our code structure actually speaks to what's referred to as light trespass. So what that is if you have lights on site, what the code is requiring is that you first of all install new lighting if you have significant improvements such as this. That's typically done in conjunction with the landscaping, so there's no conflicts. But that light trespass requirement precludes lighting that is on a private property from really going to an adjacent property, or even it's really supposed to preclude lighting escaping from that private property into right-of-way. So the question that you have is a valid one, but I think we'll have to look at it separately based on how our code is currently written.
Yeah, I'm gonna double check tonight when I leave to see how dark, because I've even brought that up to the board before. That particular stretch from about Dixie on down to about Old Avenue, the street lighting is like never working.
Okay. And if there ever is a time where it's a light fixture that is actually out, then definitely please contact the city and let us know. We can ensure that it is fixed. So I wasn't sure if it was, really the question was the lights are out, how do we fix them? Or the quality of light is substandard in your opinion, which is something else that we'll have to look at.
I think it's kind of both, kind of twofold.
Understood.
Right, I think that it's kind of getting to my point is that whether it's this facility or another facility, and if we expect to see continued growth, I'm trying to understand what kind of lighting do we have that fits the smaller footprint and is sufficient, but now we're expanding. And I'm pretty sure the applicants would like to know too, the city or the county, who's going to put the right type of lighting. I'm not saying the applicant needs to put lighting on their building. I'm saying the stretch of Blue Heron, and this building is now broad. Do we have the right sort of city lighting, county lighting, whatever it may be?
State.
Yeah, so it's going to have to be a larger conversation, really, for that entire corridor, because Blue Heron is a state roadway. So we'd have to look and see what their timeline is as far as what the life expectancy of the existing lighting is supposed to be, and see, as far as staff going back and researching to see when it is up for improvements, or if it's something that we need to start pushing for based on other improvements in that corridor.
Exactly, Madam Chair. So for tonight's purposes, this has nothing to do with the applicant because we don't want to hold up that process. But I think we as a board need to look at the broader picture of the various growth, and we need to start to say to staff, expedite this to make sure that we got the proper lighting in place. And if we don't need it, we don't need it. It's better to have it and to better to have it and get it. But the fact of the matter is, we got this applicant, they're building, and the dynamics of the lighting, I think, for this space has to be accommodated. And I know, I'm just saying, we need to push back on the staff to move that request forward, but this has nothing to do with the applicant and not approving their request. But this is just something for us as a city, and I'm speaking to the entire board.
Yes, and we can definitely revisit that before we adjourn tonight, so we make sure we get that in writing and have staff consult with the state, whatever they need to find out, you know, to see, because that also plays into our safety. I mean, if you can't drive in the dark, so yeah, we'll revisit that before the end of the meeting. Is that it, Ms. Harris Clark?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Mr. Nichols mentioned some shared parking. With this 36,000 foot expansion, how would that affect FedEx?
That's a good question. So we're only required, based on the number of bays that we have within the facility, we're only required 12 parking spaces. So there's 92 that exist on the site. So that difference is all allocated basically to FedEx. So it doesn't affect our project or expansion at all. It's been accounted for. And again, there's an agreement that's in the public record, so we have to provide those number of spaces to FedEx. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gallen?
I just have one quick question. On that existing building, will they be demolishing that building and rebuilding it, or that will just be a remodel?
It's a remodel, so that will maintain, absolutely. But full new facade and, yeah, everything will be redone.
Thank you, and I've asked my questions as we went along. So if we don't have any further comments from the board, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the site plan as presented and based upon the additional conversations about future actions on tie-downs and other security strategies.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wiley. Roll call.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Stephen Hunt,
Yes?
James Gallen,
Yes.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark,
Yes?
James Newby. I'm sorry.
Moeti Nubi?
Moeti. My apologies. Moeti Newby,
Yes.
Renee Burgess,
Yes.
unanimous vote.
Really
Thank
appreciate it. Thank you.
Here.
Okay, item C.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as previously mentioned, items C, D, E, and F under new business are all connected. You have before you a cover sheet, so to speak, for the upcoming presentation. So what this is attempting to do is indicate each one of these four items. So they all pertain to the Blue Heron Commercial Project, which is currently vacant. However, it is known by parcel control number 56 43 42 29 37 000 0030. There is an abandonment of city canal right-of-way, which is staff number AB-19-02. There is a land use map amendment request, which is LU-18-02. There's a zoning map amendment request, which is RZ-18-02. And there's also a site plan approval request, which is staff number SP-18-13. So if it pleases council, I'd like to provide an overview concurrently of all these items. And then once all questions are responded to and public comments are satisfied, then we would proceed with action on each individual item separately, if it pleases the board. So just for the record, I'll read each item. The first is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving the application AB-19-02 from BLP Blue Heron LLC, requesting abandonment of approximately 57,520 square feet of canal right-of-way located adjacent to and north of the vacant parcel of land identified by parcel control number 56 43 42 29 37 000 0030, located north of West Blue Heron Boulevard, south of West 23rd Street, east of R.J. Henley Avenue, and west of Avenue O, establishing a perpetual city utility access easement and providing for an effective date. The next is associated with LU-18-02, which is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving the application LU-18-02 from BLP Blue Heron LLC, requesting a future land use map amendment from an office designation to a commercial designation for approximately 4.91 acres of vacant land identified by parcel control number 56 43 42 29 37 000 0030, and including land formerly designated as a canal right-of-way located north of West Blue Heron Boulevard, south of West 23rd Street, east of R.J. Henley Avenue, and west of Avenue O, and providing for an effective date. The next is associated with RZ-18-02, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving the application RZ-18-02 from BLP Blue Heron LLC, requesting a zoning map amendment from an OP, Office and Professional District designation, to a CG, General Commercial District designation, for approximately 4.91 acres of vacant land identified by parcel control number 56 43 42 29 37 000 0030, and including land formerly designated as a canal right-of-way located north of West Blue Heron Boulevard, south of West 23rd Street, east of R.J. Henley Avenue, and west of Avenue O, and providing for an effective date. And the final and fourth item, which pertains to SP-1813, is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving an application SP-18-13 from BLP Blue Heron LLC, requesting site plan approval to construct 5 commercial buildings totaling approximately 31,286 square feet on approximately 4.61 acres of vacant land, identified by parcel control number 56 43 42 29 37 000 0030, and including land formerly designated as canal right-of-way, located north of West Blue Heron Boulevard, south of West 23rd Street, east of R.J. Henley Avenue, and west of Avenue O, providing for conditions of approval and providing for an effective date. So you have before you a location map depicting the site. As we go a little closer, you can see it's on the north side of Blue Heron, just south of West 23rd Street, and it's bookended by Avenue O and R.J. Henley Avenue. From this aerial, you can somewhat see the fact that there is a canal running on the north side of the property. And we have a few other images later on that depict it a little more clearly. So this image was taken just from Google Earth, and if you're familiar with the site, you will understand the true length of the parcel. I believe it's approximately 1,400 feet in length, plus or minus 100 feet or so. But as I was preparing the presentation and trying to provide some images, I guess I was looking to see if you look in the very far distance, and I'll try and get the mouse out. So in this very far distance is appears to be a white building, and that's just on the other side of R.J. Henley, and that's kind of the end of the parcel. So it almost goes as far as the eye can see as far as this image. So this image is looking west down Blue Heron Boulevard. And this image is looking from R.J. Henley east back across the canal and down Blue Heron Boulevard, which is just to the right side of the screen. This image was used because it provides a better visual for the existing canal, which is depicted here running east and west. So again, the location that the first photo was from, you can see a speck of a building in the distance, and that's where the first image was from. So this is a very long, linear piece of land. We believe that the length of the property and the format of the property has provided difficulty in development. So we're trying to come up with some solutions to that. So just for the record, the applicant is BLP Blue Heron LLC, and their agent is Schmidt & Nichols. And as previously discussed, the request is associated with the four previously mentioned items. Location has been discussed previously. This is the information taken directly from the staff report, and just wanted to provide it for the record, which identifies PCN, parcel size, where the current parcel is approximately 3.59 acres, and the canal that's proposed to be abandoned is approximately 1.32 acres. So we're looking at a total of 4.91 acres for this site if all four items proceed. It currently is vacant, and the zoning is currently office professional, and there's a proposed amendment to modify that to general commercial. The future land use designation is office, and the proposal is to amend that to commercial. As far as adjacent uses, Blue Heron Boulevard is located to the south. Canal is located adjacent to the north. There are multiple residential uses just in the north, primarily single-family residential uses. And then Avenue O and R.J. Henley more or less bookend the site. So as alluded to previously, this site has been really vacant and undeveloped for more years than I was able to even research. But we again think it has to do with the lot configuration. It makes it really difficult to come up with a site design that really works for the property. In addition to that, we believe that the future land use designation and zoning designation of office wasn't really effective as far as promoting redevelopment of the site as well. Mostly throughout the city, adjacent to any sort of principal arterial roadway, we have a commercial zoning and commercial future land use designation, mainly because of the number of trips and things of that nature. So it's much more appealing to have that designation and could facilitate future development as proposed tonight. So this background, again, is taken directly from the staff report, and it really touches upon the creative strategy that the design team has come up with in proposing to abandon the canal right-of-way, which results in additional acre plus of land for future development. With that abandonment, the proposal would be to channelize the existing canal underground. They would then use the new surface area created for parking or other uses that would not interfere with the underground channeling of the canal. And the design team will be able to expand upon some of the buffering that's proposed with the adjacent residential uses to the north. They're also looking into the best approach to ensure that there's no water management issues to those properties to the north. And the design team has a strategy for that as well. Just for the record, the legal description for both the parcel and the proposed canal right-of-way to be vacated is provided in the staff report and also provided before you tonight. The image before you is associated with the future land use map, and the existing future land use map is the above image. The current parcel is shown here, and it's designated as an office future land use designation. And the proposed future land use as commercial is denoted here on the bottom. This image is depicting the zoning map of the city. The above image is the current zoning of office professional, which is shown in this magenta color. And the proposed zoning amendment would result in a general commercial zoning designation as demonstrated with this red color on the bottom image. As you can see, the future land use and zoning directly to the south also would be consistent with general commercial or commercial for future land use and zoning. So the staff analysis, again, was taken from the staff report. As far as services, the existing city services that are required to develop the site all exist. The ultimate use is really for a commercial, retail, restaurant, medical type use within these 5 standalone buildings. Staff believes that if the zoning amendment proceeds, that the development would be consistent with zoning regulations. Similarly, the comprehensive plan would be compatible and consistent so long as the desired comprehensive plan amendment also proceeds. We see that this redevelopment of the site would be compatible to the surrounding and adjacent uses, and additional attention will be provided to ensure that that compatibility is maintained, especially with the residential uses just to the north. We touched upon it briefly with the other project, or really more than briefly, but the landscape design is going to be in line with our principal arterial overlay standards, so we think you'll be very pleased with the landscape palette that's provided. And parking and traffic meets the county's traffic performance standards, and the traffic performance standard review letter is provided within the packet tonight. Here is a site plan just for the record, and I've sectioned out the actual area to be developed from the site plan. And let me mouse over the 5 buildings. So north is up, and Blue Heron is to the south of the site. So you can see there's building, if I can read it myself here, I'll go from left to right. So from west to east, building A, building B, building C, D, and E.
Actually, it's reversed.
Is it? Yeah. Did I misspeak? It's the opposite of whatever I just said is what I meant to say. Been doing a lot of talking tonight, so.
That's because you don't have water.
Yeah, I have my side water here. Maybe I just need to take a sip from it.
We don't have water.
That was the hint.
I'll share mine if you'd like to. We can get water. We will get
Okay.
water.
Thank you.
For the record, before you is a landscape plan. Because it's such a long linear site, there are 4 sections. I have zoomed in on that so you can kind of get a feeling for the landscape design and landscape palette. The design team likes to hoard their nice color renderings until their presentation, and they don't share them with me, so I'm sure that they'll provide them in their presentation. But I think you'll be really pleased with the landscape proposed as well. And also with, again, a lot of the treatment to the north side of the site, where we were very conscious of the existing residential community, and we want to make sure that there really are the least amount of impacts as possible for use of this site, and that any anticipated uses would have been mitigated in some way, shape, or form. So here is a rendering of the site. This is going from
tenants and customers to those businesses.
Mr. Gagnon, if I can make a comment on this particular chart, it is, the artist took a little bit of liberty and misplaced where that left turn is coming eastbound on Blue Heron. It actually lines up perfectly with the main entrance into the plot. And
Okay.
so it is not a U-turn and a complicated entrance. It's much cleaner on the site plan.
That very, very good observation. And I know that the project has been worked on for a period of time, and I know there has been some modifications within the Blue Heron right-of-way as far as some of those medians. So thank you for that observation.
Mr. Gagnon,
Yes,
one
sir.
question real quick. Since we have this picture up already, where you be making the north entrance is, if you were going west, the only conflict that I would have in that situation, that given the vehicles that will be going that area, and I'm sure a couple of us discussed this last week, during last meeting, that turn-in area, was there any way possible where that black car is there to actually have that as a turn-in to where the cars will not be in traffic to actually hinder traffic going west?
So I think you're referring to something along the lines of a deceleration lane or
Exactly.
a separate turn lane.
Absolutely.
So I believe the development team has a traffic engineer with them tonight, so hopefully they can answer that question more succinctly. But from my knowledge, there are certain levels or a certain amount of trips that start to require that for the county standards.
Right.
And based on the proposal and the county's review of the project, the total number of trips anticipated wouldn't require that additional turn lane.
There's a turn before you get to it, another turn here.
You can proceed, Mr. Gagnon.
You can add that. And I may have again misspoke, but the state controls a lot of the turning functionality on Blue Heron Boulevard, same as lighting. But the county does approve the traffic performance standards for the site. And I guess one of the other difficulties in attempting to provide the turn lane, really the shallowness of the site, which is really one of the issues that I believe is preventing redevelopment or has throughout the years. If you take another 25 feet or so to incorporate that lane, you're then shifting everything back that far, which will start impacting the size of the building that can be built, the number of parking spaces that can fit on site. So it's kind of a domino effect.
But as far as the area there, I mean, I'm assuming that this is what it's going to look like. As far as the area there, like with the palm tree, the two palm trees are there in front of the little signage area. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, not move the building back, but just take that land area there in front of it and then just use that as a turning lane, because at certain times of the day, especially with the UPS trucks and the FedEx trucks and normal traffic going through there, it's going to be very, very busy. And we don't want anyone running anyone into, for safety issues, running to the back of someone. So if they can actually get into a safety lane before they actually make that turn, I just thought that would be beneficial. I'm not asking that the building be moved to where they're losing building, just that they're taking that certain part of the area and using that for a safety lane.
Okay, I absolutely agree with that, and I think the applicant should explain how they've come up with this design.
Right.
But I 100% agree with that, because we want to make sure that safety is the top priority,
Right.
especially for pedestrians and for any vehicular traffic. So I'm hopeful that the design team and their traffic engineer has a more elaborate explanation than I can provide for that.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you. So the building elevations, they're not really as pretty and colorful as the rendering, but I want to provide them for just informational purposes and for the record. So each building has its own building elevation sheet. So this is sheet A3.1, A3.2, A3.3, A3.4, as well as A3.5. So all the building design is consistent, and they all are really, as demonstrated before, will be the same design So at this point, I'd like to continue with staff recommendation for each item, and then we can go into board comments and public comments on each individual item respectively, if that pleases the board. So city staff's recommendation for the abandonment proposal, which is AB-19-02. City staff is recommending that the P&Z board recommend approval to the city council of this canal right-of-way abandonment with the following conditions of approval. The applicant shall provide a city access easement identical to the legal description of the city canal right-of-way abandonment area in order to ensure access in perpetuity following city council approval and adoption. And prior to the city canal right-of-way abandonment becoming effective, the applicant shall prepare and ensure recordation of the city's access easement within the official records of Palm Beach County with proof provided to the city's Development Services Department. Condition number 2, following city council approval and adoption of this abandonment ordinance and prior to the city canal right-of-way abandonment becoming effective, the applicant shall provide the city with a construction performance bond for 110% of the value of the cost to channelize or pipe and fill the existing city canal. This performance bond may be utilized by the city to pay for channelization of the city canal in the event that the applicant fails to complete the channelization of the project within 2 years of the effective date of this ordinance. If the city utilizes the construction performance bond, the applicant also authorizes the city to place a lien on the property for an amount equal to any additional channelization and fill construction costs that exceed the value of the bond. This condition intends to further incentivize the applicant to complete the channelization or piping project and helps to protect the city from financial risk. Condition number 3, the applicant is responsible for any and all costs associated with channelization or piping of the existing city canal. The water management capacity of the newly piped canal shall be equal to or greater than the capacity of the existing canal. The final design of this infrastructure improvement shall be approved by the city's Public Works Department. The applicant must apply for and be issued 1 or more building permits prior to any site work commencing for channelization or piping of the existing city canal. Condition 4, the applicant shall replat the city canal right-of-way abandonment area, AB-19-02, with the adjacent parcel known by PCN 5643422937000030 prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for this location. This replat shall include the city's access easement that was required as a condition of approval for the abandonment. So that ends the conditions of approval and recommendation for the abandonment. Staff's recommendation for the future land use map amendment is that staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval for the future land use map amendment to the City Council from an office designation to a commercial designation, and that's staff number LU-18-02. The next recommendation pertains to the rezoning request, which is RZ-18-02. City staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of the zoning map amendment to the City Council from office professional to general commercial. And the fourth item is the city staff recommendation for SP-1813. City staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend site plan approval to the City Council with the following conditions. The first is a 2-year landscaping performance bond for 110% of the value of landscaping and irrigation shall be required before a certificate of occupancy is issued for the site. The second is construction and landscaping improvements must be initiated within 18 months of the effective date of this resolution in accordance with section 31-60B of the city's Code of Ordinances. Number 3, the City Council authorizes city staff to approve future amendments to the site plan administratively so long as the site plan does not deviate greater than 5% from the originally approved site plan. Condition 4, this development must receive final certificate of occupancy from the city for all buildings and/or units approved within 5 years of the approval of the adopting resolution, or the adopting resolution shall be considered null and void. Condition 5, all future advertising must state that the development is located in the city of Riviera Beach. Fees and penalties in accordance with City Code Section 31554 will be levied against the property owner and/or business for violation of this condition. Condition 6, once approved, this resolution shall supersede any previous site plan approval resolutions associated with this property, causing previous site plan approval resolutions to be null and void. Number 7, the 3 concurrently processed ordinances, known by staff number AB-1902, LU-18-02, and RZ-18-02, must be adopted, approved, and become effective prior to the site plan approval becoming effective. Condition 8, the applicant shall consult with the Riviera Beach Police Department in order to incorporate one or more Internet Protocol IP cameras within their site design for RBPD use. Condition 9, the applicant shall replat the city canal right-of-way abandonment area, AB-19-02, with the adjacent parcel known by PCN 5643422937000030, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for this location. This replat shall include the city access easement that was required as a condition of approval for the abandonment. Finally, condition 10, prior to the issuance of a city building permit, the applicant shall provide a drainage report sufficient to demonstrate compliance with the City and South Florida Water Management District regulations, specifically demonstrating compliance with City Comprehensive Plan Infrastructure Element Policy 1.5.3, which is listed in full for reference. So that concludes staff's presentation. I know that the applicant would also like the opportunity to present to the board at this time.
We would love to hear from them.
Mr. Ben?
Thank you, Jeff. Probably push to get it started. This up here?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. For the record, Seth Bain, with the firm of Lewis, Loman & Walker, here on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined tonight by the applicant, Mr. Stu Hankin. Josh Nichols of Schmidt Nichols is here as well, the site planner. We have the builder, general contractor with us tonight. And we also have Kyle Duncan from Simmons & White. I obviously appeared before you very recently to discuss this project. And at the conclusion of that workshop hearing, I left the building with my client. And then when I realized when I was reading the transcript a few days ago that you had a very extensive and well thought out discussion about planning, the role of planning in your city, the various jurisdictions that are involved in that. I know Mr. Hunt did a yeoman's amount of work on exploring that. And when I read that transcript, I realized there were a couple of very important concepts that were discussed that were extremely relevant to our project. Part of that was complexity and balance, the fact that we are dealing with a myriad of different planning forces, regulations, rules. We talk about traffic, we talk about stormwater, and it's the role we have and the role you have of trying to figure out how to best balance those things for your city. There's also been a lot of talk today about the corridor and about the new regulations that were put in place for the Blue Heron Corridor. And what resonated with what was discussed at that workshop was the idea of making it easy to do the right thing. And I think that's why when you see the self-storage project that came before you earlier this evening and how much time and effort and how attractive that project is, and a lot of the work and effort that's gone into this project and why I think it's been so well received thus far, is because your staff has created a framework to really improve that corridor. It makes people want to invest in it, and it certainly made our client want to invest in it. With that said, I'm not going to go through the entire presentation since you've seen most of it, but I do want to address a few items. A very important point when we look at the location in the aerial, and as you well know, is how this canal has been both a barrier to the site for a long time and an opportunity. The homes that exist along the north side of it are set a distance from that canal. Some of them have fenced-in backyards, some do not. They don't border immediately adjacent to that canal because that canal has crept and eroded to the south over time. But as you saw from that picture that Jeff showed earlier, that canal is extremely deep, somewhat precipitous, and always has, there's always a certain amount of water in there, but it's difficult to maintain, it's difficult to keep up, and it has been an intrusion into the property for a long time. So while we are requesting the city abandon it so that we may utilize it in order to make this site functional, the end result is going to be creating something that can be maintained, something that will no longer be an eyesore or a danger to the residents to the north. As we talked about, it is our intention through both the setback requirements and landscaping requirements to do a number of things. One is make sure that if there's any runoff from those homes, that we are gathering it on our property and channelizing it into it, which we would anticipate being a low swell like you typically have on the front of a road, except that it'll be adjacent to the 6-foot high wall that your code requires we install when we're building a commercial project next to residential. So they'll be at 6 foot high, so there'll be a certain distance of a grassed swale, the 6-foot high privacy wall, and then beyond that, all of the landscaping and parking along it. So that's what we were proposing. So these are the requests that we have had before you this evening. As you know, we don't know what the ultimate mixture of uses will be in there, but our goal is to promote small businesses in the district, the sorts of uses that can be a benefit to the residents in the immediate surroundings. I know, and part of that discussion at the workshop after we left was about that need to have uses in proximate to your neighborhoods so that people can be less car dependent, so that they can walk to a restaurant or walk to a store or to the salon, and that's increasingly what we're attempting to do. I think these images, better than any of the site plans, really reflect what it is we're trying to achieve. And Jeff was exactly right. We're trying to promote that sort of urban feel where you can see the buildings. You don't have a huge parking lot in the front of them like you have in some of your older traditional strip retail neighborhoods. You've got lovely architecture, a strong architectural landscape feel, and a meandering sidewalk through it. So here is that site plan in that slightly better colored version. So there was the mention of the traffic and a turn into it. From a purely technical standpoint, and Kyle could speak to this better than I could, but as it talks about in the traffic study, there's a threshold for when you're required to put a right-hand turn lane in, and it's based on the number of trips you expect. The reality of this site is, even though it's extremely long, we're putting a far lower density than would typically be permitted in your general commercial. Your general commercial zoning district allows a 1.4 FAR. That would be 200,000 square feet on this site of development. To accomplish that, it'd be many stories, et cetera. We're maintaining a scale that's compatible with the neighborhood to the north, that'll fit on the site, but the reality is the traffic generation by the site is very low, and there won't be a grocery store here, there won't be a Target, there's nothing that's attracting huge amounts of traffic. Again, these are smaller businesses that will attract people throughout the day. The sorts of businesses that, even if it were an office where there was a huge influx of traffic in the morning, that won't be the case here. The sorts of businesses here are the sorts that will get a certain amount of traffic in and out throughout the day. The second point, and how we addressed specifically what he was talking about, is, as you can kind of see from the mouse here, where that turn-in occurs, we have what the traffic engineers refer to as throat depth, which is that there's a really long distance here before you have to come to a stop, meaning 4 to 5 cars can fit in there so that there's no backup onto the road. So typically when you've got those deceleration lanes, it's because you're entering immediately into a parking area and you don't want that stacking out on the street. In this instance, you can make that right turn in and then you can immediately proceed into the site for some distance before you hit any intersection. There's no parking spaces along that spot. Let's get back to where I'm at. There's no parking here. You get all the way past the building before you get to where there is a crosswalk, and that's the first spot, but you can stack 4 to 5 cars in there. And that's how functionally it addresses that fact that even though there's no turn-in lane, at the anticipated traffic volumes, there's no conflict and there would be no backing up onto Blue Heron Boulevard at that main entrance or at any of them for that matter. Again, the landscape standards are what they are. I think Jeff and Josh have done a good job of talking about how the code has been set in place to really make to hold every developer's feet to the fire, and the overlay corridor really does step up the requirements on that area. That's the wrong button. That's it. Thank you. So, now you're familiar, this is the site, we're asking for that 40-foot be abandoned so it can be incorporated into it with, the conditions that Jeff has read before you this evening. We've, reviewed those conditions and accept all of them as proposed. This is how that site plan, how the rezoning and land use would be modified. Again, consistent with what's along the corridor and what's across the street from it, just mirroring that and consistent with the uses in the area. Going over again, I mean, we have had discussions with, people throughout the city, and I think there's a certain amount of enthusiasm about the investment made into this corridor. And like I said, it's not the most intense use that could possibly be made, but because of the constraints of the site, it is still a significant investment. It's a significant improvement in the value of the corridor, and it's really beginning to make that overlay that was put into place come to life. The traffic study was done, as Jeff alluded to. The traffic study was in your package this evening, I believe, and it met the standards. And again, because of the type of uses and the scale of it and the distribution throughout the day, and the fact that this is the sort of project that captures trips as they go by and is not a huge draw from the region, it met the county's standards and was not considered was no problem. And the Department of Transportation reviewed the driveways and preliminarily approved them as well. So we appreciate Jeff's comments. We believe that the site does improve the corridor and is an exciting opportunity for us, and we'd be happy to address any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have 2 comment cards on the issue, so we're going to hear from the public before we have board comments. So first up with comments for items C, D, E, and F is Lynn Hubbard.
Good evening, Madam Chair and fellow board members.
Good evening.
I'm Lynn Hubbard, and the other members out there are my neighbors. We live on 23rd Street, and most of us have lived there for quite a few years, the least of us maybe 10 years. That property has been proposed to be developed for a very long time. But the reason that it hadn't been developed was because of its constraints, and the canal and the configuration is one of the constraints of that property. Some of the things that we have a problem with and that we're concerned about is the impact that it's going to actually do to our property, such as the foundation, the construction alone, the bringing in, closing up the canal, the cement, the trucks, all of that is going to have a major impact on the foundation of our homes. And you ask me how I know that. That's because this work has been studied and gone over every time a developer wants to do this. As far back as when we had Mr. William Wilkins as our city manager. The closing off of that of the canal, the right-of-way, we've always been told by the utility department as well as Public Works, the X amount of feet behind your home, that is our property, we have to give it up as a right-of-way so that the city can come in there and maintain and do their business. So while it's now in the hands of the city wants to give away that right-of-way to the developer so that that land can be developed. The filling in, the compacting of that canal itself is going to have a major impact on our homes. A lot of our homes still have the cast iron pipes. This is a major detriment to our investment. What we just experienced with the streets in Monroe Heights was devastating to our community and to our homes when the work that was done there, the seismic pressure, it broke, it came up into people's homes, the pipes broke, everything that could possibly happen affected our homes. We fought against the coverts in the middle of the street. We're stuck with that. And everything that's proposed is a deterioration to our investment. A 6-foot wall is not going to do anything for the barrier of sound right against our homes as we try to sleep and we try to secure our properties. Thank you.
I'll allow you proceed if you need more time because we only have 2 comments and you are a resident. You live on the back of this project. So we certainly want to hear the voice of our citizens.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was stated that that there wouldn't be a whole lot of traffic, that it would just be traffic that was moving and going back and forth. But it was also stated that we don't know what kind of businesses would be there. So we really can't say how much traffic, if you will, that would actually be there. And again, the buffering. We live across from FedEx and we live across from UPS, and the noise is already, an inconvenience. Having, if the noise was just a problem and we thought the wall would do that, then that would be up for discussion. But what we're talking about now is the homes that we've invested in and the damage that it's going to be. I know that their professional service persons would probably tell you that these are things that we shouldn't be concerned with. But the reason that we already know that they are is because these things have been looked into in the past, and we've been educated on all the damage and how the damage would occur. We ourselves, we're not professional engineers by any stretch of the imagination, but we've already been educated as to what is going to happen, the impact that it's going to have on our homes, and how it's going to impact our homes. I'm sorry that more of our residents couldn't make it out tonight, but we hope to bring more of them out, for the next hearing. The other thing that we talked about, or that was mentioned again, was, just the configuration of that property is what it is. And to acquire it, to assume that you're going to be able to just change it to meet your needs is quite presumptuous when we have been there. At a minimum, I've been there more than 30 years on that strip, and the other people have been there quite a while too. So we have endured a lot of stuff, but we know that we had to give up that land so the city could get back and forth. We're asking and we're hoping that they hear us and not give it away so that the canal could be closed in, because that's going to be a lot of construction, number one, a lot of noise, and a lot of vibration for months on end to our house. And can you imagine the cracks and the shakes and that cast iron pipes being subsequently affected? And a lot of us right now can't afford to go under there and have all that cast iron replaced right now. Usually you get it replaced when it breaks, because you have no other choice. So I thank you for listening to me, and we ask that you consider us and the effect that it'll have on our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard. Next comment card we have is from Claudine Anthony.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Claudine Anthony.
Good evening.
I am a resident of the city as well as an employee, so I get it on both sides. However, As Ms. Hubbard previously stated, I am an investor of the city. I own my property. I believe I'm the youngest resident on 23rd Street. Ms. Hubbard spoke of the things of the history of the past and the configuration of the property, but my concern is safety. The safety of not only myself, but of the seniors on my street. When you put up a buffer wall and you think about the opioid and heroin pandemic we currently have in this society, we have to go in our backyards for our garbage. Now we have to be concerned about being jumped by someone who's an addict. Not only that, but someone said that it's an eyesore right now. For me, it's not an eyesore. When I look out my back door, because I do not have a fence, I made the decision not to get one. I look at the beautiful palm trees that are along Blue Heron Boulevard. This will block my view. I've heard one of my elected officials that requested that this be made a two-story project. Really? You didn't think about me as well as the foundation? Ms. Hubbard talked about UPS. We hear the trucks when they don't purposely hit the building as they're backing in 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, being awakened out of our sleep saying, what is that? So we will have to deal with not only UPS, FedEx, but the construction. I'm quite sure, if I remember correctly, our code allows to begin at 7 a.m. I myself have a chronically ill husband, and all his days are not good days, but thank God his good days outweigh his bad days. However, I can see how this would be disadvantageous to him. And we're talking about compatibility. Well, there is residential on the east side of this piece of property as well as the west side, along with the north side. So this would not only affect the single homes that's directly to the north of this project, but also to the east and the west of this project. So I, as a resident of this city, I am asking that you all do not approve this. I'm not against progress in our city, but I vaguely remember that that was supposed to be a linear park that never came to fruition for whatever reason. I do not want to look out my back window looking at a wall. I purposely did not put up a fence so that I could look at the beautiful palm trees along Blue Heron Boulevard. I ask and I plead that you all take us, the residents, especially my seniors, as I approach to being a senior myself, take our safety into consideration when you look at this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Anthony. Okay, we're gonna move into, well, I should ask this of the applicant, if you would like to address any of the concerns before we move to board comments that the residents brought up.
I would be happy to. A couple of things to consider. One is, when you look at the aerial of the site and you see the location of that canal and how much it has impacted the property, any future development of the site is going to require some relocation of that canal. And that would have to be a discussion with the city as to whether that's the city's cost or some shared cost, because the reality is that it's currently trespassing onto the site, and if there's any future development that's going to occur there, some earthwork's going to have to occur there. The second is, we're becoming a denser community and city, and the development of new construction next to existing housing occurs every day, occurs throughout this county. And it's something that both the construction experts are cognizant of and recognize, because there is certainly liability when you damage somebody's house that you're next to. But more to the point is the location of this canal and the proposed pipe and the location of those homes. The distance of the proposed pipe is more than 40 to 50 feet away from all of the homes, so it would be well removed from them. The location of the wall is intended to provide for just the sort of noise, buffer, and security that, they recognize occurs along Blue Heron. The fact that, UPS is there and FedEx is there, there's quite a bit of traffic noise. And the reality is that the wall and the buildings there would actually provide, and the significant landscaping throughout the site will be a significant buffer to that noise, to that activity out there. The reality of the security of your backyards is something that, we all struggle with, no matter where we live. I like to think this wall would be an increase in security as to what is now, an area that people can traverse through, that vacant people can camp out in, that trash accumulates in, et cetera. Certainly on our side of the wall, there's going to be lighting, there's going to be security, there's going to be monitoring. As you saw, one of the conditions is that we have to have the police department's IP protocol cameras on site to make sure that from Blue Heron to that wall, that we're keeping it secure. And then on the other side of the wall, we would hope that the residents would be able to do the same. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, we all understand that, population growth and that we're all dealing with denser population. But when you're a resident and you've invested your money, your lives, the lives of your family in a community, and, to have a project come out to just kind of downplay what that means to a homeowner, to a resident of this community. Yes, people deal with it every day, but that's why we have these boards to be a voice for our residents. So just because it's happening, and it may be happening in other communities, doesn't necessarily mean that we have to let it happen in our community. And so I don't like that it's downplayed. If anything, if you're coming in and you're trying to work with residents, see how you can better build that relationship so you get what you want, but they also protect their investment as well. Okay? So we're going to start with our board comments. I'm going to start with Mr. Wiley.
Okay, let me ask a question. I know Mrs. Hubbard said something about, not Mrs. Hubbard, Mrs. I'm sorry, ma'am. Yes. Now,
Anthony.
Miss Anthony, you asked a very good question about the wall. Let me ask you a question, if I can. Is it the size of the wall that may be the issue, or is just the wall, period? Or do you want it to be increased from 6 feet, or would it be just not the wall, period?
I prefer not to have a wall.
Then not to have a wall, period. Okay, because I was just saying from a safety issue where you said between the vagrants or anyone in the area.
We don't have a problem with vagrants on that property.
Right.
In spite of what the developer stated. We don't have that issue.
Right. No,
We don't have tents.
No, I'm saying from what you said earlier about, I guess, heroin epidemic and drugs or whatever like that, to where your
Yeah,
safety
because
coming in.
if you look at the proposed building and look at, you may have medical offices there.
Right,
They're gonna have to throw out their stuff. People are gonna go through that stuff looking for needles.
right. Okay, so I didn't know whether that was, I just wanted to make sure that was clarified, or whether that could be a simple solution to be able to either build a bigger wall, or what your desire was not to have one at all.
I'm not against development in our city.
Right.
It's much needed. However, this type of project along that corridor behind those single-family homes, you talk about compatibility, that's not compatible for us. Let alone how the construction is gonna affect the foundations of our home,
Right.
the roofs of our home, the walls of our home, the cast iron pipes. Like I said, I'm the youngest resident on that street. I've been on that street for 12 years. So there's no one on that street that has been there less than 10, as I am the youngest resident.
Right.
So the comments made by the developer were appalling and offensive.
Do you have any other comments, Mr. Wiley?
That was it.
Okay, Mr. Hunt?
Maybe this is for Mr. Gagnon, or maybe we need to address it with the folks at Stormwater. My presumption is that the idea of piping that canal and getting it undercover has been done in the city before. There's even indications coming from the north side of that property. So have we looked at how to minimize the disruption and the complexity of the process of just piping and filling in that waterway is just the first issue. And then what can be done, perhaps as the chair has recommended, with the neighbors to figure out how best to schedule the right timing and minimize the disruption for during the actual construction of the facility itself. I think the closest to the property line is the canal and the changes to that canal. So I'd like to really understand how can we minimize the disruption and also address the issue of getting connectivity from those homeowners without causing a ripple effect back into their plumbing and things of that sort.
Yes, sir. So I think the vibration concern is a very valid concern. We've experienced enough either roadway reconstruction projects or other large-scale projects that we've seen what the effect of that could be. However, there are construction best management practices where non-vibratory machines are used or more careful care is taken based on the adjacent conditions of property or things of that nature. So it very well could be a recommended condition of approval, and if the development team accepts a condition, to ensure that the least invasive construction techniques are utilized, even if that does mean a larger cost, because it could be specialized equipment, specialized machinery, just out of pure consideration of that neighborhood to the north, in addition to the fact that even though it might be a smaller upfront cost, the long-term benefit as far as not running into liability issues for damaged pipes, damaged foundations due to vibratory actions for the construction would probably result in a longer term savings for the development team.
If I may follow up, I mean, it seems to me that with precast pipe and things of that sort that would be going into the area for the canal, that could be done relatively quickly. It's not going to be done overnight, but it could be done relatively quickly with mostly positioning the material into the canal and doing that rather than having a lot of big earth movers and coming in and tearing up the entire spot.
Right, and there are techniques that are available that can allow for monitoring of vibrations. So basically utilizing equipment to ensure that certain thresholds aren't exceeded. So things like that could be put into conditions of approval to ensure that there are any impacts to adjacent properties or to mitigate those potential impacts.
Jeff, approximately how long would that process take? Or give me a good guesstimate of what would be expected from that, as far as the length?
I don't have a time frame. Perhaps the development team has an estimate at the length of construction.
We're talking about just the canal, possibly 2 weeks.
So the development team is saying approximately 2 weeks.
To put in the canal. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that becomes quite important is the canal is not exactly the most desirable thing to have close to anybody's property. And so it's not a beautiful lake and requires other maintenance. So getting that enclosed, if it's only 2 to 3 weeks or even a month, that would be a relatively short period of time and could be done fairly surgically with precast concrete pipe and things of that sort that would require a minimal amount of heavy road graders and things of that sort, would seem to me.
Having open canals in that format, it really provides an additional liability concern to the city, being that it's open and it's accessible from anyone that has access along the Blue Heron corridor. So from a liability standpoint, from a city perspective, if it's channelized and put underground, there really is less of a liability as far as somebody gaining access to an open canal.
I think during the previous presentation last month, there was discussion about connectivity or options for additional ducts to collect rainwater from the other properties and feed that into the new piping. Would that have any ripple effect back on the homeowners' plumbing situation? I wouldn't think so, because this is not a wastewater canal, this is a stormwater canal.
Right.
So it's stormwater coming off of the roof and off the land and draining into the canal today. It's not wastewater, it's not anything offensive.
Correct, and what the design team is proposing is to provide a swale-like area leading up to the proposed wall that will ensure that if there is any rainwater that historically has flowed south into the canal, that it's captured and it's channelized into the underground piping.
Okay. I would suggest, subject to any other board comments, that there be a little bit more clarity of definition and perhaps a workshop with the neighbors to explain what can be done, not only to simplify the process of getting the canal taken care of, but also then how would the construction proceed in ways to pay close attention to their concerns and their issues, and minimize the disruption and the difficulties.
Understood.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Yes, Ms. Harris Clark.
The last time the applicant was here at the tail end, I think I was very clear to have indicated to get buy-in from the residents by having a series of vignettes to discuss this project. And we have 2 residents here, and I'm sure if the applicant had reached out, we probably would be in a different position as far as how the residents feel. So that hasn't taken place, and those residents probably saw the last P&Z meeting, and here they are. I want to look at what their broader concern is. Again, them being a resident, and we're talking about a wall buffering, and I had this in my notes prior to the residents coming up, that we don't know what type of entertainment is, not entertainment, but what type of businesses are going to be there. So let's hypothetically say it's a restaurant and they're going to have music. What is the wall going to do to buffer that? I mean, I live at the marina. I also live by the old maritime school, and I'm on 11th Street. The marina is, community center is far away from me, but I have impact windows and doors, and that music comes through my house, and it shakes my house, where I had to complain to the city that you need to put an ordinance in place to either shut the music down at a particular time, or you're going to have to look at the decibels, if you will, because if I am 3 blocks away, there isn't any reason why my house should shake. So we don't know what type of businesses will be on this property. It could be a restaurant. Restaurants make money if you got entertainment. Entertainment is music. And again, I think if this had been flushed out with the developer to speak to the residents and get their feedback, we might be in a different position here today. I want to go back to something that Mr. Wiley said. I understood what about the traffic engineer and the traffic and how it met certain criteria. But the thing is, if you have successful businesses there, even if you have an open house, a restaurant, it's doing good, it's got music, the idea that traffic wants to slow down and turn into that complex, you have slowed traffic down. I'm just not really comfortable with the fact that the traffic flow has simply met this criteria when we don't know what type of businesses will be in the complex, because their successful activity is relative to the amount of people that want to turn into that complex. And the amount of noise is relative to the comfort and convenience of the residents who this is their property. This may be their property in which they may sell it one day and move somewhere else, but they want to be able to get the fair market value. And I did speak to the applicant where I did say you need to speak with the residents and speak to them from a monetary standpoint and get their buy-in. So evidently there's not buy-in because there hasn't been open dialogue. And I probably had something else on there, but I don't think it is relative now because I really want to take the consideration of the residents in play. I want to say that, using my home as an example, I think Ms. Anthony has a valid point. There is maybe a space between the property owner's house and the complex, and even where I live at, I got that opening right there. And to be perfectly honest, I got a commune of homeless people right now living right behind my house. In that area, there's this little small opening, even though there is a fence. They argue, they fight. I got to call the police. They got tents everywhere, and it's a bunch of them, and I got to deal with that. And they're absolutely right. We may think that the best case scenario is that it's not going to happen, but when you have a little area, unfortunately, someone who is in that unfortunate situation, maybe they are homeless, or maybe they have been abused by some sort of drug situation, they are going to hide. I see that right at the marina. When I walk the marina at night, I see individuals come into our marina. They found the little hidden nooks and crannies behind the fence, the opening space of buildings, and that's where they are. I have to deter myself and walk somewhere else, because I think someone, unfortunately, who has put themselves in that position, I don't know what state of mind that they're in, but I certainly know if I keep walking, they jump out at me, it's my fault because I saw them hide themselves in that nook and cranny. These things you do have to take in consideration. I'm not exaggerating. It's behind my house right now. Matter of fact, as I think about it, I'm mad enough to call a police department and say, move them out right now because we got children. I think about the marina, as I just gave an example. I don't walk by that little tiny beach anymore because I know that there are certain people who wait and they kind of walk over there, jump the barriers, and sleep in there, and they live. So I think the residents have a valid point, something that the developer really has to think about, but all of this could have been alleviated by having that dialogue previously with the residents.
Thank you, Ms. Harris-Clark. Going over to Mr. Nakumbe, do you have any comments?
Yes. Well, I guess I'll start with, I'm just looking at the plan again, and it. Well, my first question is this an opportunity zone project?
I don't believe so, no.
Not.
Enterprise zone, no.
It actually, it is in an opportunity zone, but I purchased it.
Please speak into the microphone. Whenever anyone's talking, we need you to speak into the microphone.
Hi,
okay?
so I'm Stu Hankin. I'm the developer. It is in an opportunity zone. However, I purchased it before opportunity zone came into effect. So we're not getting opportunity zone tax benefits for developing, if that's your question. But it is in an opportunity zone.
Okay, okay. So there's no retroactive way to get into that program with the opportunity zone. It's
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think it's pretty clear if it's purchased before December 31st, 2018 or something like that. Yeah.
okay. Well, I guess my comments are, just looking at the strip of land, it looks really, seems like a very difficult thing to develop. Just the way that it looks. So initially, it seemed like an interesting project, but obviously we have residents who are most affected by it. To me, it seems that there's about 20 to 25 homeowners that that definitely need to be reached out to, and I would like to get a polling at least on the 23rd Street on what residents actually think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure why there's a strong perception that I have no intention of working with the residents. I completely understand that this is going to affect the people that backs up to that street more than the thousands of other residents in the city of Riviera Beach. I'm more than happy to sit and work with them and have the conversation. Do we want a wall? Do we want to keep it an open parking lot? We thought the wall made a lot more sense so that there aren't people walking behind houses, but happy to sit and work with the residents to have those types of conversations. Over a year and a half ago, I reached out to Ms. Hubbard, who is here, to sit and talk about this project. We never made any progress in that year and a half, but I'm more than happy to have that dialogue with every single resident on that street. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Just from my comments, I'm seeing about 25 homes.
Yep.
And I definitely think the people on that main strip, it might just be an effort of just one by one, because I think every resident, I'm a statistician, so I believe everybody has an opinion. But I do believe that, if you, to try to get some consensus, look, if you can get 80% of the people and they like what you have to offer, then, that's interesting. I mean, I think the idea about I definitely have seen situations where there's development, there's a lot of squatters, and the other issue was, and this is kind of with the other project as well, where I think that I know in Thousand Oaks we hire off-duty police officers to kind of monitor our streets, and I would like to see that be more of an initiative with development where, as part of the development requirements, that maybe we devote a certain amount of hours to, give police officers in the city a chance to maybe make some extra pay at, where they're actually keeping, because they know the residents already. They can, they can actually protect the areas, and it, gives them opportunities to increase, their perks. So I would like to see, especially with something like this, if it was to, go through, I would like to see something like that. But definitely, and then also regarding the piping, what's the cast iron pipe? I think that one actually stuck out to me because, look, I don't know anything about this. I mean, hey, it could happen. It may not happen. But the reality is, I like to, if everybody's pipes breaks, what is the remedy? So let's not talk about what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. I like to say, if the worst thing does happen, what exactly are you willing to do, or what is the remedy? And and those are the types of things I'm concerned about.
Okay, yeah, just want to repeat, I hear you loud and clear. I'm open to, I'm not sure what the proper format is to having a discussion with the residents and outlining specific concerns, specific, how we deal with if part of my construction causes damage to their homes, then how do we deal with that? How do I deal with that? How do we together figure that out? happy to work through that in the proper format. Not really sure what the proper format is. You know, everything, the way I look at it, when you boil it down, the simplest issue is we have a commercial parcel that abuts 25 residential properties. What do we do about it? I'm open as the developer to figure that out in the proper format. You know, if it's a question of not building anything, obviously that's a hard way to have that conversation. So if the conversation is we're moving forward with this building, let's figure out how we do it together in a way where we're not damaging properties, we're not hurting property values, we're not causing extra noise, we're not making it so residents can't sleep. That's obviously, if I'm doing any of those things, I'm doing more damage to the community than good. Ultimately, the way this project works is if I'm doing good for the community, and I truly believe that. So,
well, my last comment, basically, for me, as far as like action steps, is I see about 25 homes. I think that as you came up with a simple, pamphlet summarizing what you're planning on doing, and and maybe going door by door and getting feedback and seeing are people interested or not, and if nobody is 90% of the people are not interested, it's probably a dead project. But hey, if there's 75% of people are interested, then I think that tells you that you're bringing something that they actually, because hey, there might be people who actually want this. We don't know. We only seen, we only have heard from a couple of people, but I don't know.
And I don't want you to take this the wrong way of what the residents are saying. It's not you as a developer. The residents are saying they had a project done in their neighborhood, and the construction company, the general manager, and so many people at fault, and I've seen the pictures. It was an absolute nightmare. So the residents have this gun shyness in their heads, thinking the city allowed it to happen to our neighborhood, and it was horrifying. I saw the pictures. So here we are getting ready to have another project come in, and the residents weren't considered.
Sure.
You may do a darn good job. Great general manager, great construction company, great everything. You just have to alleviate, unfortunately, the perception and bad work that someone had done before you that has left a bad flavor in the resident's mouth. And that's just a hurdle that you have to overcome. So it's not anything that you've done. It's just past experience that they're still dealing with now.
Sure.
And want to get that comfort level, and that open dialogue, I think, will help alleviate some of that.
Yeah, again, I'm not exactly sure what the right format is. If we create some sort of workshop or a meeting in which we can all get together and have a conversation,
Sure,
happy to do it.
Sure, you can pull
If it's
upon
everybody
the city.
yelling at me that they don't want it to happen, that I don't think that'll be very productive.
Resources of the city, because we do this all the time, that we meet with residents over
It'll be door to
coffee
door?
and donuts,
Okay, yeah,
lunch,
door to door.
little room,
I've just
utilize our facilities.
Understood.
And it's
Yeah.
very simple, very easy.
Can I comment one more time? Because I want to be extremely specific about what I think you should do.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to talk. I want to, so
I hear you.
I think you should go door to door.
Okay.
And talk to every single person who was behind this development. I'm not talking about doing coffee or anything. I think that's a good idea, but I do feel like that it's not the responsibility for the people who live there to have to come out and take time out of their day to see what
Understood.
you're doing.
Okay.
I think that if you're really interested in doing this, then reach out to them, because personally, it looks like a nice project, to me, but I can't just make a decision if the people who are most affected by it don't like it. But also, from a developer's perspective, it would actually concern me if you don't feel like it's worth your time to go into the neighborhood. I'm just telling you, from me,
Sure.
that will bother me if I don't think you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm absolutely willing to do that. I'm very invested in this project. I've been working on it for over 3 years. I don't think you were here at the last meeting, but I'm also heavily invested in the community. I've completed 5 single-family affordable homes that we just recently sold to homeowners. We have 10 in construction right now. So my concern is absolutely with the people of the community. Happy to go door to door and have that conversation. You know, this project obviously affects those houses more than anybody else. I hear you. This project is for everybody in Riviera Beach. You know, I think that, you know, I'm not sure the thousands of residences, but this will have a generally positive impact on the entire city. So, whatever, you know, conversations I need to have with those homeowners, happy to do it, and I will make the effort without a doubt. So,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry if I seem a little tired. I had a baby girl 5 days ago, so
Oh,
have not been
congratulations.
sleeping, doing my best. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Madam Chair, if I
yes.
may, as far as some of the notification procedures and processes, I apologize, I didn't specify the notices that have been sent. So I did want to touch upon the fact that we did have this item workshopped at a city council. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but at a previous city council meeting, it was workshopped. Our last planning and zoning board meeting, it was workshopped as well. So those were 2 public meetings where there was additional opportunity for public comment. Prior to the planning and zoning board workshop, notifications were sent out to all property owners within a 300-foot radius, which captures really everybody on the street just to the north, in addition to residents beyond that. So that notice was sent out prior to our previous planning and zoning board workshop on the item. Those notices were also sent out prior to this meeting as well. We post the information on the city's website. We send legal notice as well. So we've definitely attempted to reach out from a city perspective to inform that neighborhood of this project proposal. So I just wanted to make that known for the record.
Thank you, and we appreciate the city for that. Mr. Brown, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yes. I think one of Mr. Anthony's questions, I guess, was the safety of the citizens from the proposed site. We know that the canal is a great buffer. I mean, it is. Is there anything that would come close to canal as a deterrent of, you know, going across, or for anybody?
Yeah,
the team.
and I guess the attempt is to provide a different type of buffer, right? So they're both vertical buffers. One is going into the ground and one is coming out of the ground, right? One of the items that was really difficult with this site is if the canal isn't abandoned and that land area can't be utilized for development, a lot of the site logistics don't work as far as having enough space for parking, as far as having enough just area for site circulation. What hasn't really been touched upon from a city staff perspective is, you know, the density and intensity of the proposal. So what's currently being proposed is really as compatible of a project for this location that could be proposed from a staff perspective. You know, I know there has been discussion at the city council workshop as far as asking for additional height, contemplating 3 stories, 4 stories, which, if you could imagine, you would have these building floors that could be able to look into people's property, which is really not what staff would prefer from a compatibility perspective. So the design that's proposed now, it has a 2-story type of silhouette, but it's not an actual 2-story development. Plus, the buildings are really situated as far south as possible. So I did want to touch upon the compatibility issue. So to answer or attempt to answer the question as far as what other methods are available to try to prevent individuals from going from one parcel to the other, I think that would have to be a brainstorming session. I can't think of anything any other option that is readily available that
coincides with the abandonment request and the site plan as proposed. So I don't know, we have, multiple industry experts here. You yourself I would consider you an industry expert as well as far as some of the concepts that may be available. So as previously discussed, we want to come up with the best solution for everybody. So however that buffer area is resolved, we want to make sure that it's as compatible as possible to the adjacent community.
Madam Chair.
Were you done, Mr.
Yes.
Brown? Was that your question?
I'm done, yes.
Go ahead, Mr.
I actually
Wilder.
wanted to kind of talk about what he actually stated also, as a question. For the buffering, if that wall is not put up, and let's say we made that property, I guess, smaller to where the canal was still there. The way that canal has over the years, you say it's kind of morphed itself into a certain area, or so now would that lead to other safety issues later on down the line, to where it would actually now start to impede on the project, impede on the property, to where now it's a safety issue for if that is built, to where now it will start be a problem to the property, to where now we may have a situation to where we may have a cave-in or something like that.
Yeah, so I know we're just talking in hypothetical situations now, but from a very real legal perspective, as mentioned by Mr. Ben, the canal itself, it should exist within a platted right-of-way area. Right. So you could go out and survey the site and determine if the canal area is truly within the area that it's supposed to exist within. Looking from the documents that I've seen over time, or it could have been existed this way from day one, it could have just been trenched out this way, and over time, erosion from one side or the other could have kind of changed the location of the canal. But one of the worst case scenarios that could come up is the property owner could demand that the city remove the canal area from their property, and then that could result in, again, more construction on site, but not necessarily resulting in any true improvements other than just redefining the location of the canal. So that's a real possibility. It could be, if there's a different development design that's proposed, maybe it's even smaller, the canal would have to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. If the site's being developed, the canal is part of the equation.
So best case scenario is what it is. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gagnon, it's for me, it's not so much the design of making the canal work. It is, we as a city have not made any improvements in the infrastructure on the property of those homeowners. And I think what the homeowners are saying is, if there's any significant construction disruptions, because our infrastructure of cast iron pipes are so weak, it's just gonna snap them. And I've experienced that already, not from a construction standpoint, but my cast iron pipes were weak and they just broke. And I called the city and said, hey, your cast iron pipes broke and water's leaking everywhere. Come fix it. Well, I got a nice little chuckle and said, ma'am, that dime is on your time. Mm-hmm. And I just bought the freaking house. And I had to get someone out there to dig all of that up and go into my pocket, in which I was not prepared to do that. And didn't I know those pipes were that crazy bad? That's what the residents are saying. This has nothing to do with the applicant. This has more to do with us as a city to, along with the applicant, to have heard that kind of feedback. We may even already know it. I know we've been talking about it for 5 years. The applicant doesn't know that. The residents know it. The city know it. I don't live over there. I experience, and I know it. I think that's what the other concern is. If we didn't cover that.
Madam Chair, may I comment on that?
Yes, go ahead.
Is there a, during development, is there some type of insurance product that expands beyond the construction to the nearby residence, where if there's any major damage, that it covers that? I'm wondering if that's something that could also be included, if we were to approve this, that there was also on the condition that our insurance actually expands to any negative impact that may affect X amount of homes. Has that been done before? Is there a product like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I believe that does exist as far as what insurance is available to contractors, but I think it'd be more appropriate for the development team to respond to that inquiry directly.
So I just asked the general contractor. He's not aware, unless we're specifically doing work on somebody's property, there's no insurance that we can have to cover damage to somebody else's property. We'll have to, again, in those conversations and workshops, discuss if there's a crane that, well, there's not going to be a crane, but if something we do directly damages something on their property, how we deal with that. And again, I'm open to discussing that. And I think to the issue of the pipes, again, as we're building homes in these communities, I am also aware of the pipe issue. We've had to dig up a street recently and fix it all. The way the pipes run is through the actual line of the street. And then from the middle of the street, the cast iron pipes hook up to the city's connection. So in the back of the houses, there are no pipes running or connecting that way. So, of course, I don't know for sure, but I don't think it will have an immediate impact because the streets are directly on top of the pipes. We're completely behind there, so there aren't any cast iron pipes running on or around the back of those properties. So.
And that's okay, that
Yeah.
may well be. It's just to give the residents a comfort level, and also to give us a comfort level, because, again, I wouldn't know. I just know what I experienced, because the pipes are on my property, and they did what they did. So it's just to give everybody a comfort level,
We'll
I
explore
guess.
the insurance. We'll be fully insured. Absolutely. But off the top of our head, RGC's been doing construction in Palm Beach County for 40 years. He's not aware of any specific product that insures surrounding properties from damage. So,
well, I do know that the insurance company, they sometimes offer custom insurance coverage just to, there's a price for anything, and if we kind of clearly define, hey, here goes the concerns that we have 30 homes that they're concerned that there might be some damage from an impact. Can we pay some premium that if there's any claim that they can basically cover that? Because again, for me, I just want to know what I want the residents nearby to feel comfortable with it, and I would like to know what do they want to see in that area? Because like Jeff said, I think it's a very complicated. It's not it's you had a large plot of land. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. It's a very thin piece of land. It's long. How many projects can you actually do with this type of property? So I get the difficulty, but I still feel like if we can just do some type of survey and maybe get a feedback, is like, hey, just to know, because I would feel comfortable if that was that effort. Just that strip alone, that would make me feel comfortable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nakumbe. Mr. Gallen, your comments.
Yes, I really would like to see this project move forward, but I've been in that situation Ms. Hubbard is talking about. When they redid the highway, Martin Luther King, I was one of those homes that was damaged. And the contractor's insurance company is gonna fight for the contractor, not for the homeowner. So I had to pay my own. Been there, done that, got that T-shirt, and Ms. Hubbard knows it. That's why I said from the beginning when we had the workshop, make sure you talk to the neighbors. Is there any way that you can put up funds yourself if there's any damage to to those properties? To where you can set it to the side, because your insurance company is not gonna do anything for them.
I don't fully understand the situation and what damage we're talking about.
Any type of construction
on a-
damage? It can be cracking from the outside to the inside.
I'm absolutely open to that. I'm absolutely open to figuring out how we deal with any issues that I directly cause any of those homeowners. I'm absolutely open to that. I don't think, maybe there's an insurance product, maybe there's not. Probably much easier to resolve without an insurance product. Absolutely. Yeah.
A very good thought, and that would be something that you would have to then go back to your team, because they seem to be pretty competent. And I'm sure you have those people to advise you on what's the best way once you get that feedback from the residents. But that's going to be an integral part, because yes, this is our community. We want to see it beautified, but we also want to protect our investment.
Absolutely.
Okay? Do you have anything else, Mr. Gallen?
I'm good. I just wanted to make that comment because I've been there. So I would rather for it to be taken care of up front if anything does happen.
Okay, so being that there's no more board comments, we've done the comment cards. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, just as a point of clarity as well, I know that you offered extended periods for public comment, so I just want to make sure that that's satisfied, the public comment period for all 4 items, if that's how we're treating it, or if we're offering additional opportunity just to ensure that there's no issue in the future as far as not providing opportunity for public comment. I think we've satisfied that, but I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Yeah, it's satisfied. We only had the 2, and because we only had the 2, I did give them extended time. And we do have other items. So there's a comment for another item that's coming up. So we can address that, anything else that comes up in public comment.
Thank you,
But
ma'am.
I think you guys have been given some good direction, staff along with the applicant, to go from there. So the question at hand was for the items of C, D, E, and F. Is there a motion?
As much as it breaks my heart to say it, I think we have conversation about a bit of a delay to allow time for the survey. So I move we delay a decision on the project for 1 month to give time to the developer to resolve the issue and to come back to us with a much more focused issue on just the contacts with the residents, and not have to go start from scratch, but to just address that issue.
I believe we would.
We're in the middle of a motion, sir.
sorry.
I'm sorry. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
William Wiley.
Just point of clarification, it's to delay by 1 month the approval. That's the motion.
Would that be to the next month's Planning and Zoning Board meeting? Is there a date for that?
We're still legal, if you can give us clarification, because there's a motion on the floor. So I believe as the chair, how we have to carry that out is anyone opposing, then they would just vote against that and then make a new motion. Like say if they wanted a new motion that did not, specify.
Chair, you're correct.
Okay, so the motion is as stated on the floor to delay for a month and then come back. So it's been properly motioned and second. And so now we're ready for the roll call.
William Wiley.
I'm sorry,
This is to delay.
Point of clarification, so we'll have legal
right,
clarify.
I understand,
To delay it
delay.
for 1 month, for 30 days.
until we find out from the neighbors on 23rd.
Well,
We
the-
don't,
Oh,
that's
wow.
what the.
The
Well,
motion
they're gonna do to
was,
us.
I'm gonna clarify the motion. The motion was to delay for 30 days, to give the applicant time to get refocused and come back. That did not include anything from residents. It was for the applicant to get focused and then to come back within 1 month. So as it stands, that is the motion on the floor, so you could either yes or no it, and then you can make a new motion if so need be, but that is the current motion that we have to move with at this point.
Thank you for clarification.
Okay.
Yes.
Stephen Hunt.
Yes.
James Gallen.
Yes.
Anthony Brown.
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark.
Yes.
Moeti Nube.
Yes.
Renee Burgess.
No.
That vote passed with Renee Burgess dissenting.
Okay, thank you. Next item,
Madam
9 workshop items, we have none. So we're gonna move into item 10, general discussion, item A, public comments. We do have 1 public comment card for this item, and that is from Lynn Hubbard.
Madam Chair, board members, originally, the extension you gave us would have covered this public comment, but I was a little confused with the motion that was made. We kind of thought that we was here to have to determine whether or not, we were going to move forward with it or not, and not just have it delayed. So based on the agenda book and the recommendation that the motion is made to the recommendation, up or down, it didn't happen. So I was just a little confused about that, and I was just hoping that you could clear that up a little bit for me, because based on the agenda, the item where it says recommendation, was that recommendation voted up, or was that recommendation voted down? But there was a totally different thing that took place, just the
So-
delay, but that wasn't spoken to.
Right, so the motion that was made by Mr. Hunt was to delay a decision. So no decision was made, so that decision to approve or deny this recommendation to City Council has been delayed for a period of 30 days to give the applicant time to go back and do whatever they need to do. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to include getting with the residents as what was recommended, because that was not specifically made in the motion. So they could do that, they could not do that. That's up to them on how they choose to work the 30-day time frame that they have. But that was the motion, and that's why I voted no for it, because it did not include that specific thing. And I wouldn't have put a time frame on that, because they may need more than 30 days to get with the residents. But that was the motion that was on the floor. That is the motion that passed.
Okay, I heard you guys speak about a workshop that took place about this particular item. Was it a public workshop or something?
Yes.
A couple of times it was referred to that there had been a discussion concerning this item at one time before.
We workshopped this item on December 19th. So in tonight's agenda, the minutes from that agenda, from that workshop are in the minutes from December 19th.
Okay, okay.
It was also a workshop with the city council prior to P and Z. They did it first, and then it came to us, maybe out of courtesy, I'm not sure, but we got it second.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. There's no more public comment cards at this time, so the next item is B, correspondence.
No correspondence, Madam Chair.
Okay, so item C, planning and zoning board comments. I'll go back down the board because that's the best way to keep me in line and make sure I don't miss anybody. Mr. Wiley, do you have any additional comments about anything?
Yes, not about this, well, yes, about this subject also. Again, I'm getting a couple text messages and information and telephone calls, and actually a couple visits again for what we talked about earlier, Mr. Gagnon, about the trucks and the vehicles coming through the neighborhoods over in the Federal Gardens area, there's Parson Heights area, close to Suncoast, to where, again, one of our, it's good, they did actually a great job when the police officers actually stopped one of the 18-wheelers that were actually coming through, crossing over Avenue R, and made him actually exit out to Blue Heron and then come back around, which was the right thing to do. Again, there are no signs there to prohibit there, and was there any correspondence to the companies or to the businesses to educate their drivers not to come through that area? Because now I can understand what Mrs. Hubbard is talking about, because when these vehicles come through our house, come through our neighborhood and hit the speed bumps and come down, they shake our foundation. And I have a leak in my house right now that I can't find for some reason, because every time it seems like I'm having a shift or whatever. So I understand where she's coming from in that standpoint. But is there any way possible we can actually get these, because the neighbors are actually coming down there now complaining about the vehicles coming through there and the FedEx trucks, UPS trucks speeding through. And I don't think they do as much damage, but the 18-wheelers is just, that's beyond me. Because the whole point of Martin Luther King being expanded and being created for that standpoint was for the vehicles to be able to go down that area, to come across Australian, come up to Australian and down Martin Luther King to where they have to go, to where they have to get on I-95 or get to some major roadway. But can you imagine how dangerous it is to have an 18-wheeler driving through a neighborhood and making a turn, and you got kids out playing, you have vehicles parked on the side of the road? That, to me, that seemed to be a big hazard. And now, like I say, when I'm coming home, I got someone's knocking on my door saying, hey, listen, you part of the board, right? Hey, get this taken care of, or try to get this done, because this is what almost happened. My car almost got hit. This almost happened. So I definitely wanted to make sure I addressed that. And was it any way possible that we can go back now and at the entrance of Federal Gardens, where those vehicles now, to where they know not to come in that area, right? Because there's no reason for 18-wheeler to come through Parson Heights, go through the Suncoast area, or to go down R Avenue, or to come into Federal Gardens. That doesn't make any sense at all.
If I remember correctly, our Public Works Department had worked on a report associated with some options available to try to mitigate truck traffic through that 13th Street corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look and see. I believe it was a digital report that I can forward to the board. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the item, and I think there's ultimately an issue as far as whether or not, if there's signage put up, whether or not it's enforceable per state law. From what I recall, that I remember participating in a meeting, it was probably a year ago now, I think, there was conversation from some of the police officers associated with enforcement, and they found that it was basically impossible to enforce violations for trucks traveling through certain corridors unless it was specifically associated with weight limits tied to like a bridge or some roadway capacity, which is an engineering capacity issue. So I think from kind of two ways to look at it. One is the purely legal perspective where we kind of know there could be an issue, but the other is from just the community perspective where we can put up signs and we can attempt to reach out to businesses and kind of come up with handshake agreements saying, you know, unless you're delivering packages to this specific neighborhood, we would prefer if you use the main arterial roadways, Blue Heron, Australian, Congress, versus taking these really neighborhood streets to make deliveries or for any other truck traffic circulation.
So that is something that, and I'm probably ignorant to the fact about code enforcement. That is something code enforcement could not enforce if 18-wheeler came through a neighborhood, because that would be, if that's something we agreed upon, that would be something that would be a violation of, because like you said, Mrs. Hubbard here, and we are talking about stopping a major project because of that reason, because it may end up damaging someone's foundation of their home that they actually own. So in this situation, I'm discussing the same thing. With a vehicle that constantly comes through, it's not a 2-week period where this may hurt someone's property. We're talking about something that comes through, you know, annually. It's all the time. And like I said, I live on that block, and I feel when the trucks come through also. And it's the same thing. It's a lot of traffic coming through, and it's a lot of it is just coming from the vehicles that are coming from the warehouse district, and not taking Australian to Martin Luther King as they should. I think that was the whole point of that being built, was for that kind of transportation. So if you can, Mr. Gagnon, please, let's get something done. I guess if it can be in writing to where I don't want to have an issue to where I have to stop a vehicle and park my car across the street to make them go back. Because it's getting to that point now to where, like I say, they're coming through with all kind of speeds. And it's getting uncomfortable now when the people start complaining about their kids playing on the side of the road or cars parked in a vehicle that almost got sideswiped.
Okay. I haven't been working on that item specifically, so please allow staff a little bit more time to go back and see how far we've come as far as research.
Yes.
I know Councilperson Lanier has really been trying to champion the same item, so I know there has been recent progress on it, but I just need a little bit more time to go back and get with our Public Works Department and Police Department to see where we are at this point.
All right, please do. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can I bootstrap off of that a little bit? What I would suggest you do, Mr. Gagnon, is to actually propose an ordinance that is directly related to what kind of acceptable traffic is allowed in residential areas. And let's stop beating around the bush, pointing fingers over who's supposed to enforce it, and let's make it a declaration of policy within the city that residential streets are residential streets only. And small delivery trucks, that's fine, but not 18-wheelers or big, heavy construction equipment that's merely trying to be efficient. So I think we ought to be quite emphatic and bring it up as a proposal, and then we can give it to the council and they can see whether or not that
That's what the developers do when they come in and they want to do something and it's not in place. They go to the city and propose an ordinance for it.
Right.
Very, very good.
Thank you,
Very
Mr.
good thought, Mr. Hunt. I also had a thought for you, Mr. Wiley. You know, you gotta get them where it hurts. So these companies that you refer to, get your neighborhood, you know, your group, your neighbors, and write some letters and do some social media, get the news out there.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Nobody does anything without media attention these days.
Right. Now, one of the, I'm glad you said
hit them
that.
in the pockets.
I'm glad you said, are you done? Okay.
done.
I did that also. The police officer, someone actually sent me a picture of the police officer actually stopping the 18-wheeler, and I actually posted that so everyone can see. And I actually congratulated that police officer for doing his job. And it had him here. It's on actually on one of the websites for the city of Riviera Beach, to where he was telling them, hey, you got to, go down our avenue. You have to go around. You can't go through the neighborhood. And I gave kudos to that police officer for doing so. So you're absolutely right. Giving proper notification out there to where now hopefully he passes the word and say, hey, let's not go through these neighborhoods anymore. Let's not pass by the school area anymore because there are kids there. And like I said, this is a residential area. So absolutely correct.
And once they see, we won't tolerate it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Hunt?
Yes, one quick item. I wanted to give the board an update. I've made good progress on finishing up the first cut of volume 1 of our members' handbook. And I would like to see when we could schedule a Saturday, probably Sunday's not a good idea, but Saturday or Sunday, when we could get a majority of the board sometime in February or early March to go through that volume 1. By that time, I'll probably have volume 2 and 3 ready as well, and at least start the process of getting everybody up to speed on some of the key issues that we're going to be facing over time.
Okay. So you're asking staff to look at their calendar right now and see what Saturdays could be open?
Yep, and poll the delegation, if you would, to propose perhaps 2 or 3 dates, and then let us know, and we can all vote on what days, not vote here, but respond back to you on what days would work. But I would propose either a Saturday or a Sunday in February or the first 2 weeks in March. And let's see what days we can get the majority of the board.
I would say if it's Sunday afternoon.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
And I would say probably 2 to 3 hours maximum, because our patience factor will disappear if it goes beyond that.
Okay, got it.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Nakumbe?
Just one observation that I had regarding, I noticed on both proposals that we had that both companies were supposed to work with the police department to put up cameras on their property, and I think it might be a good idea, and I'm not sure how we can actually structure this, but I would like to see if possible to structure in the contracts maybe some minimum hour commitment to overtime pay for some of our local police officers. If we, for some of these, especially for a warehouse project, it was something that came to my mind. It's, I kind of think that, it would be nice if some of our officers were familiar with the properties, they got some extra pay, and I think it would actually benefit everybody would benefit from it. And it also kind of guarantees that when businesses come into the community, that we actually are going to have some people from the community who are getting jobs or actually getting hours, because I kind of take the job commitment with a grain of salt. I don't, it's really hard to enforce. If they say they're going to bring 50 to 100 jobs, we can't really enforce that. So I think that, but I do feel that, protection, safety, that some of the issues that were spoken to about this project where concerns about loitering or drug use, and I think a lot of those things can be alleviated if we do put pressure on some of these developers to, hey, we have off-duty police officers who, we can hire, and we already have, and we already do have pay issues anyway. So if we can figure out a way to get them extra money, improve the safety of the neighborhoods, force developers to have to come more out of pocket, and and pay our residents, I think it's kind of win-win-win. So I would like to see some, if we can figure out some way to incorporate some minimum. I'm not saying a maximum, but some type of minimum for these major projects where there might be safety concerns.
We can always include that as a condition of approval in our recommendations with the project. Now, can we force them to do it? No, but so when they stand to the podium and they tell us, oh, okay, well, they don't want to do that. And then when it's time for us to vote, we still vote yes for them to come and have their way with us. Basically, after we just said, we would like for this to be a condition of approval, but then we don't back ourselves up when we do that. So, and if they don't like it, they don't have to put their project here. They can look elsewhere. But this is our city, and it's definitely our right as a board to recommend that to them. And like, they can tell us no, but when they tell us no, then what do we do?
Well, I think it's similar to the landscaping bonds that we have commitment where.
That's a condition of approval.
Oh, it's conditioned, so they don't
Yeah.
have to do that?
Well, they have to do it in order for the project to be approved. But as far as like you were saying about making sure our residents get jobs,
Yeah,
they
that's
can
harder.
say that. That's the hook when they're at the podium. But like you said, how is that policed? And I don't think that's policed, correct, Jeff? I mean, and we
I've
have.
seen historically certain applicants have committed to certain thresholds, whether it's during the construction process. I know there's other, similar to, I know enterprise funds have now changed to, the word just escaped me.
Incentive?
No, and Mr. Newby had brought it up previously, I believe.
Oh, enterprise zone or
It's
something?
it's not enterprise anymore, it's been amended.
Oh, opportunity
Opportunity
zone.
zone.
Thank you so much. Opportunity zone. So, similar to opportunity zone, there's other funding mechanisms that promote exactly that, and they have to meet certain benchmarks. But not every applicant is trying to take advantage of those funds. So, it is difficult to monitor as well, especially with a smaller business that may only have a few employees. So, a percentage of 5-employee workforce versus a percentage of 100 employees. If you lose one employee with the smaller business, there goes 20% versus one employee with that larger workforce is only a 2% impact. So,
Well,
it
at the,
is
at the
difficult
risk
to
of
monitor.
trying to engineer a solution, I mean, there's also the idea of, of a stipulation that says you are strongly encouraged to address security issues
Yeah.
and consider these elements and leave it at that and not try to put in the hammer of enforcement. And at least you're encouraging people. And at least you're starting the process of dialogue about how to incentivize them rather than looking at it as an enforcement issue. I think we want to keep enforcement to things that are really much more severe than how many jobs are being staffed.
Well, that is kind of severe.
Well, no,
for
no,
this
no, I understand.
area, but
Oh, no, I
I
understand.
understand what you're saying too.
To mandate
Yes.
hiring X number of people or something of that sort would be a real serious intrusion into their.
But other municipalities do it. I'm not going to sit here and say that other people don't do it in their communities. I mean, that's just what they stand for. And when we don't kind of put our foot down and say this is what we want for our community, then we come in and we get anything because, yes, we want to see development, but and growth, but to what extent? So that's that's opinion. But again, yes, we can certainly put that as a condition of recommendation. So.
I just think it's just gonna make it different. I do agree, and it's been frustrating to me too because I've seen it personally where I try to get someone a job after well qualified, and then all of a sudden you get this runaround, and and you realize that they're not doing what they say they're supposed to do.
That's the hook.
But at the same time, I think that the reason why I mentioned maybe our officers, because I do feel that everybody desires protection. I think safety is a very important issue, and and having professionals in our community, and not necessarily forcing them to hire, but hey, like throughout the year, have set a target of, let's say, 100 man hours of an off duty. That way that we know that, hey, we know that our local officers are on target, that they're on site. We know that the more than officer is around, that it's going to lower the violence in that area. So we're not just doing this just to create jobs. We're literally lowering the chance that there's going to be issues that are going to come back on us. So, you know, I'm starting there because I agree. I think that trying to mandate, as frustrating as it is, trying to get them to hire residents, there's a lot. It's a lot more, I think, of a challenge. But I do feel like we can maybe start with, hey, getting them to utilize our police force. I think that at least creates some type of dialogue where everybody benefits. The business benefits, the officers, and I think the community benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Nakumbe. Ms. Harris-Clark.
Just a caveat on the jobs. It's always been a nice word to say to city council and to the mayor and to the residents to get buy-in on a particular project, but we've never as a city set the tone and commitment for businesses to come in and do the right thing by us, and that's a charge, I think, with the mayor and also the city council, and we as residents demand that since they are our voices, that these are our expectations, and bring the jobs here. And I 100% agree. I remember at some point there was this motto, I'm the jobs person kind of thing, and nobody got a job. And we're responsible for that as a city, not holding these developers' feet to the fire, and we're just accepting everything. To Mr. Wiley, I want to say you are the voice for the concern that you just expressed to Mr. Gagnon, but you cannot do it alone. And I become that spokesperson in my community, but I flip the script and say, I'm empowering you, resident, to come and speak your concerns. I will stand with you. I will stand alongside of you, but I'm not going to speak for you. Because number one, I got a job and I can speak for myself, but I'm 100% to stand with you. If it's that important, you come out. You talk to city council, you come to the association meetings, you talk to code enforcement, you talk to whoever you got to talk to. But residents have to be empowered, and you have to empower them and give them power. Absolutely. And I want to say to the residents that your P&Z board is only as good as when you come out and help us help you. I know that many of you look at the P&Z board meetings and you think that we're doing a really good job, and we certainly appreciate that, but we may not always have the answers because I come from my personal experience. So I'm open, and I want you to help me. We can help the city together, and we can also help the economic development growth of our city and make sure that we can help people come here and develop our city and grow our city and bring their business, but we have to do it together. You have to help us help you and help those developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris-Clark. You preach. I just be wanting to say amen. I'm sorry. Mr. Brown.
I have no additional comments.
Mr. Gowan.
I think enough has been said. I have no comments.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Wiley.
Just one comment, please, because you guys are making some very great points here. I just wanted to state that when I first moved back down here, I'm born and raised here in West Palm, in Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County. When I first moved here, I took a job promotion to the FedEx in Fort Lauderdale, and I moved in the Delray area on off Atlantic Boulevard. And one thing that I did see was that development on Atlantic Boulevard of how bad it was and how the housing area was bad and everything. And then now to drive down to Atlantic Boulevard and see this beautiful stretch of road where people are now enjoying themselves. You got the tennis court over there, you have the restaurants, you have clubs, you have everything there, and it's like wow, because I saw it when it was nothing. And one thing I've always said was that when I look back on our city and when I left here and came back to where I see Blue Heron and I see the potential and I see the things that we need to become this great municipality, we can't be scared to make changes in our city for progress, all right? because I guarantee you on that boulevard, at Atlantic Boulevard, there were people who were not happy about the changes that were being made. And I do understand the issues, but in the process of having progress, we need to be able to open up and say, you know what? If this is what's going to help the greater city become the greater Riviera Beach, is what we want it to become, sometimes there are changes and positive changes going to have to be made. And we have to come to that tough decision. And boy, we have a tough decision here between, residents and our city prospering and becoming something like what Delray is right now. Because like I said, at some point, Delray was not like that. It was really bad at some point to where I didn't want to go down Atlantic Boulevard. And now it's just like, it's a whole different thing. It's 10, 15 years later. And now it's like everyone kind of goes down there and have a good time. They don't have to travel to South Beach anymore. They don't have to travel to Fort Lauderdale and Miami anymore. Now they stop right there in Delray. I want them to be able to stop right here as what our motto was, a great city to do what?
Live, work, and play.
Live, work, and play. We can live, work, and play right here in our city, but guess what? We have to put things here for progress to make our city want to be here, to make our city become a city. If it's going to be Riviera Beach City, let's make it Riviera Beach City, and let's make these changes. I don't agree with everything that goes on in my neighborhood. I just disclosed something that I do not like. But guess what? For the greater good for my city, this is something I'm going to have to allow. I own my property also, and I don't want something to lower the value of my property. I understand that. But if it comes to the greater good of my city to be able to become that better city, I can make a sacrifice for taking parts of my, that's just my personal viewpoint, to take certain part of my property to make it better, to expand the road, to make it better for the citizens there. So I just want us to please, let's think about the progress of our city and not be too scared of change to be able to make this city as what I saw what Delray become over the past 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned.